Chapter 22-29. The plain-clothed man stopped again. He only said one sentence, and it was 3 words. Sorry. What followed was the sound of sword being unsheathed. The plain-clothed man stretched out his hand and made a sword-drawing gesture. In the 10th level of the Purgatory of Darkness, there was suddenly an unparalleled murderous sword chi that caused the clouds to collapse and the void to become chaotic. At this moment, the drunkard and Goldie were facing a formidable enemy. Rise! The drunkard's sleeves fluttered, and a strange white flying sword appeared between his eyebrows. As soon as it appeared, it illuminated the mountains and rivers. Tut! Goldie opened his mouth, and a purple gold bell emerged. It was overflowing with light and radiance. Vaguely, there was the sound of the gods chanting. At this moment, an illusory sword essence condensed in the palm of the plain-clothed man. His clothes fluttered, and the sword essence poured out like a waterfall. It was like a brilliant sun, dazzling and powerful. The drunkard and Goldie looked at each other and attacked together without hesitation. Slash! The plain-clothed man looked indifferent and casually slashed out the sword essence in his hand. From this moment on, the entire 10th level of the Purgatory of Darkness was in turmoil. The 9th level, when the terrifying aura of the plain-clothed man awakened from the 18th level and rushed all the way up, Lin Sun also felt a fatal threat. If there was a trace of hesitation before, then at this moment, he almost used all his strength to move away with the old bronze tree. It's useless. This thunder and lightning forbidden zone has long been covered by the power of my smelting god pot. Otherwise, why do you think the Kunwood divine tree didn't escape? Ming Zi's voice sounded, full of contempt and coldness. Sure enough, Lin Sun immediately noticed that in the thunder and lightning forbidden zone, in addition to the terrible Kunwa thunder and fire rule, there was also an obscure and mysterious aura, like a big net covering. Lin Sun was about to try to break through when he suddenly noticed that the obscure aura, like a big net, was trembling violently at this moment, and there was a faint sign of collapse. Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw that the arrogant Ming child showed an imperceptible astonishment at the moment. Although it was fleeting, Lin Sun still keenly caught it. Instantly, he stopped in his tracks. Daoist friend, you're not running anymore? The old bronze tree was still confused. He had no idea what Lin Sun wanted to do. There's no need to run. What do you think, boy of wealth? Lin Sun said with a smile. His black eyes looked at the child of hell in the distance. You with the surname Lin, why don't you try calling me the god of wealth again? Darkchild's face sank, and he shouted loudly with slight exasperation. The boy of wealth, said Lin Sun. Darkchild, at this moment, the veins on his forehead bulged, and he was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. However, it just so happened that he had no choice but to restrain the rage and killing intent in his heart. You will definitely die. In the end, he choked out these words. But Lin Sun laughed more easily and said, There's something wrong with your refining god pot, right? Do you want to give it to me? I'll help you take a look. The old bronze tree finally understood and said with a smile, I see. I thought you had some extraordinary means. It turns out to be a silver spear with a wax tip. Pretty but useless. Lin Sun was startled. This old guy's smile was too wretched. Was this still the fierce and arrogant Emperor Realm, evil soul? Something wrong? Aren't you worried that it's just a camouflage? Darkchild took a deep breath and said coldly. In reality, he had been secretly exerting his strength a long time ago, desperately using a secret technique to activate the power of the god refining pot. However, what made him anxious was that the connection with that senior was intermittent and intermittent. Camouflage? Then I really have to take a closer look. As he spoke, Lin Sun turned back and approached Darkchild. His black eyes were as deep as the abyss, revealing coldness. Darkchild panicked, but he said fiercely, Go to hell. Boom. He turned his palm over, and a fan that was as red as fire appeared in his palm. He waved it fiercely, and suddenly, boundless fiery rain divine flame gushed out and swept towards Lin Sun. Southly Divine Fire Fan. It was another Emperor weapon, and its quality was marvelous. Although it was not as good as the Origin Spirit Gourd, it was not an ordinary Emperor weapon. Lin Sun could not help but laugh. He took out the treasure, binding golden rope. With a swoosh, it passed through the sea of divine flames and swept towards the fire feather fan in Darkchild's hand. Under normal circumstances, Ming-Zi would have been able to avoid this attack. However, all his energy and thoughts were focused on activating the smelting god pot. As a result, when the treasure-binding golden rope swept over, the southernly divine fire fan in his hand was swept away. He could only watch helplessly as his treasure flashed past his field of vision and fell into the hands of the enemy he hated the most. This feeling simply caused Darkchild to be on the verge of going mad. Why didn't you dodge? Is it because something happened to the refining god pot that you have no time to care about other things? As Lin Sun spoke, he approached. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Darkchild waved his sleeve, and 3 Taoist seals whizzed out. They were engraved with the words heaven, earth, and human. They flew out in a triangular formation, and they actually developed a grand scene of heaven and earth being divided and living beings rising together. Obviously, this was another set of monarch weapons. This scene made the old copper tree's eyes turn red, and he breathed heavily. Did this kid carry a shocking treasure with him? How could he have so many monarch weapons? It was impossible not to be jealous. The old copper tree had seen Lin Sun's many monarch weapons before, but it was far less than the number of monarch weapons that Darkchild had. It was an endless stream of monarch weapons, and it brought one surprise after another. The old copper tree was sure that if Lin Sun was targeted by those monarch realm big shots, he would definitely die without a whole corpse and be devoured alive. Lin Sun unceremoniously took out the Endless Way Pagoda to suppress them. With a series of collisions and roars, the 3 Taoist seals once again became Lin Sun's. Anything else? Continue. Lin Sun laughed. He somewhat liked the pleasure of seizing treasures. Of course, this pleasure could only be given to the rich and powerful Darkchild. If it were anyone else, they would not be able to do it. Seeing Lin Sun getting closer and closer, Darkchild completely panicked. Ignoring the pain in his heart, he screamed, "Senior, Senior, save me!" His body glowed as he desperately activated the refining god pot. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed slightly. Senior? Could it be that terrifying aura that was about to arrive but suddenly disappeared? While thinking, Lin Sun's movements were not slow. He suddenly slapped the air with his palm. Boom! The palm print was like a cauldron that flew across the sky. It manifested various great Tao laws and surged with divine splendor. It easily blasted Darkchild away, causing him to scream in pain. Lin Sun's eyes brightened. There was indeed a problem with the refining god pot. In this way, a Darkchild who had not yet become a monarch was simply not a threat to him at all. Don't come over! Darkchild shouted angrily and seemed to be a loss. His appearance made the old copper tree eager to have a go. He wanted to rush up and plunder this human-shaped treasure house. Boom! Lin Sun swung his palm again. It was so powerful that Darkchild flew backward. His face was red and swollen. His teeth peeled off, and blood flowed from his lips. Lin Sun, you will definitely die, definitely. He crazily activated the refining god pot, as if he was grasping at the last life-saving straw. Lin Sun couldn't help but be slightly disappointed. Obviously, Darkchild didn't have any monarch weapons that he could use. Otherwise, he would absolutely not be so powerless to even resist. Give me the refining god pot. As he spoke, Lin Sun directly stepped forward and kicked Darkchild to the ground. However, when Lin Sun was about to make a move to seize the refining god pot, a wave of terrifying spatial fluctuations suddenly surged. A big yellow dog suddenly charged out and opened its mouth to bite Lin Sun's thigh before vanishing on the spot. Boom! At practically the exact same time, a terrifying sword intent flashed out from where Lin Sun stood, causing the space there to be directly slashed into pieces and transform into a narrow and long rift. Lin Sun instantly broke out in cold sweat. If Big Yellow hadn't rushed over in time, then that sword strike from before would have almost taken his life. Kid, you can't seize that refining god pot. The karma involved is too great. Big Yellow's expression was serious, and it was rare that he didn't have a trace of arrogance. Only now did Lin Sun notice that there were many sword marks on Big Yellow's body. Its fur was dyed with blood, and its ferocious aura carried a pungent smell of blood. Big Yellow, who was under second senior brother, was actually injured. Big Yellow is right. The drunkard also came. His face was pale, and his pupils that were bright like swords were also filled with seriousness. Previously on the 10th level of the Purgatory of Darkness, he and Big Yellow had joined forces, but they were only evenly matched with the plain-clothed man. Especially at that moment, just now, the plain-clothed man seemed to have gone mad and desperately broke through the obstruction of the two people and came to the 9th level. If Big Yellow hadn't arrived in time, Lin Sun, who was about to seize the refining god pot, would very likely have suffered. Senior. At this moment, Dark Child, who was beaten black and blue and had disheveled hair, let out a cry that sounded like crying. He was so excited that he couldn't speak coherently. He saw an illusory figure in plain clothes standing in front of him. The figure was thin, but it emitted a bright light like the brilliant sun. In his hand, he held an illusory sword intent, and his whole body was suffused with an unparalleled murderous aura. When he saw this plain-clothed man, Lin Sun's pupils shrank. He only felt a stabbing pain in his mind and divine soul, and he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. How terrifying! As for Old Copper, he had already collapsed to the ground, shivering, and was scared out of his wits. Whether it was Big Yellow, the drunkard, or the plain-clothed man, the power emitted from their bodies was too terrifying, and it made him feel suffocated. The plain-clothed man glanced at Dark Child, then looked at Lin Sun in the distance, and suddenly let out a long sigh, as if he was a little dispirited. You and he are both peerless quasi-emperors, but there is a great disparity in your combat strength. Do you know why? His voice was like a sword, revealing supreme majesty. Because you only have treasures in your heart, and your great way is also exchanged with countless opportunities. How can you seek the great way like this? These words made Lin Sun quite agree. Without the refining god pot, Dark Child's combat strength was indeed too weak. Dark Child was sweating profusely. His face was pale, and he was about to say something when he saw the plain-clothed man withdraw the sharp sword intent in his palm with a clang. He looked at Lin Sun and suddenly said, "Who is Tai Xian to you?" Chapter 22:30. Along with the appearance of the drunkard, Goldie, and the plainly clothed man, it caused the lightning forbidden area to fall into an extremely oppressive atmosphere. No one had expected that at this moment, the plainly clothed man would ask a question that seemed to be completely unrelated to the matter here, and it seemed to be extremely sudden. "Who are you to Tai Xian?" Lin Sun was stunned, and then he realized something and said, "Senior Tai Xian taught me." No wonder. The plainly clothed man's voice was extremely calm like the surface of a lake without any ripples, and it caused others to be utterly unable to discern exactly what thoughts he had in his heart. Thus, he gave others an unfathomable feeling. Senior, Ming Child was anxious. He'd been bashed violently earlier and lost all face, and he'd accumulated a bellyful of resentment since a long time ago. At this moment, he urgently wanted to use the plainly clothed man to kill Lin Sun. But before he could finish speaking, the plainly clothed man had already said, "If I go all out, I'll surely be able to avenge you and kill this kid. But I can't guarantee if you'll be able to walk out of here alive. Conversely, if I go all out and take you away, then it's absolutely impossible for them to stop me. Now, you make a decision." His words were frank and upright. Ming Child's expression changed indeterminately. He wished for nothing more than to cut Lin Sun into 1,000 pieces. Yet he didn't want to lose his life for Lin Sun. But he was too unwilling to leave just like this in the end. "Fellow Taoist, the current situation seems to be beyond your control." The drunkard spoke with a sharp and bright gaze. "If he goes all out, then it really might be possible." Goldie's voice was low as he said faintly, But if we go all out as well, then it'll be different, right? The drunkard nodded. The atmosphere in this expanse of the heavens and the earth grew even more oppressive, and it caused them to be unable to catch their breaths. It seemed as if an unpredictable slaughter would erupt at any moment. Seniors, let him go. In any case, I didn't suffer any losses. At this moment, Lin Sun took a deep breath and spoke with a smile on his face. It was impossible for him to watch helplessly as the drunkard and Goldie went all out for him. As for the life and death of Ming Child, it didn't matter since a long time ago. What was an enemy that was bound to be unable to be a match for him? Ming Child was exasperated. What do you mean I didn't suffer any losses? It was clear that Lin Sun had taken advantage of them. Profound demise, true halberd, origin spirit gourd, starry sky myriad diagram, southerly godly fire fan, 3 talents true seal, 36 ultimate swords, which one of them was not a treasure among emperor weapons. But they were all snatched away by you, surnamed Lin. When he thought up to here, Ming Zi's vision went black, and he was angered to the point his chest was on the verge of exploding. He had painstakingly gathered these treasures over the years. He had originally planned to use them to roam the world after he became a martial emperor. If you really can't accept this, then just give it your all. The plain-clothed man softly sighed. His attitude towards the underworld child was one of indulgence. He was even willing to risk his life for it. This sort of protection in itself proved that the relationship between him and the underworld child was not ordinary. Dark Child's face was twisted, and his heart was in turmoil. He really wanted to kill Lin Sun now, but he cared more about his own life. The Dark Child stuttered and struggled for a long time, but he couldn't say a complete sentence. His appearance caused the drunkard and Big Yellow to feel a wave of contempt. But they had to admit that this fellow Dark Child had the capital to make anyone in the heavens jealous and envious. He had a strong foundation and countless opportunities and treasures. Even if he encountered danger, he still had the protection of a peerless figure like the plain-clothed man. Even if he was a good-for-nothing, others could only envy him. With such a state of mind, when can you be independent? His Majesty Emperor of the Netherworld spoils you too much. The plain-clothed man let out another long sigh. If it was only Dark Child, then his aptitude and talent were remarkable. But when he stood in the same world as Lin Sun, he instantly seemed to be unbearable. The plain-clothed man had traveled the heavens his lifetime and was used to seeing heroes in the world. Lin Sun was the first junior that he couldn't see through. The more they were compared, the more mediocre the underworld child seemed. Senior, my father once said that my disposition has always been like this, and there's no need to change it. I'm attached to fortuitous encounters and treasures, and that's the grand Tao I seek. It's just like Senior Sword Tao. They're different means yet achieve the same result, and there's no difference. At this moment, Dark Child seemed to have calmed down, and he said seriously, I'm the son of the Underworld Emperor, and I've always possessed supreme fortune. All of this was left behind by my father, so it's naturally impossible for my grand Tao to be separated from all of this. It can't be said to be sitting idly and enjoying the fruits of others' labor, but I'm walking on a grand Tao that my father prepared for me. Could it be that there's something wrong with this? Could it be that the son of the Underworld Emperor must abandon all external possessions and protection and cultivate by himself? If I really did that, then wouldn't I be neglecting the essentials? That would be too stupid. When he spoke up to hear, a wisp of firmness appeared between Dark Child's brows. I believe that this is what my father is willing to see as well. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Fallacious reasoning and heresy? It didn't seem like it. It could only be said that the grand Tao that Dark Child sought was too unconventional, and he had a clear awareness of relying on his father to make the best use of everything. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but look up to Dark Child. This fellow's grand Tao was actually related to opportunities and treasures, and it was really unique. The more Dark Child spoke, the more confident, disdainful, and proud he became. What's more, my state of mind has never been confused by external things, because I've seen too many opportunities and treasures, and I've seen all the beauties in the world. Only then do I know what is unparalleled beauty. After tasting all the fine wines in the world, only then do I know what is good wine. After seeing so many things, what treasures and opportunities can still affect my Taoist heart? After seeing thousands of ships, my Taoist heart remains the same. When he finished speaking, Dark Child's whole body exuded a vigorous and arrogant momentum. Then how about you give this smelting god pot to me? Lin Sun opened his mouth, and his words caused Dark Child's expression to freeze. The resentment that was about to be suppressed began to surge again, and he was almost unable to suppress it. At this time, this fellow was still thinking about his smelting god pot. Wishful thinking. Dark Child's expression was livid, and then he said to the plain-clothed man, "Senior, let's go." He finally made a decision. In this world, there was nothing more important than his own life. If there was, he wouldn't exchange his life for it. The two of you still want to stop me? The plain-clothed man looked at the drunkard and Big Yellow, and his voice was calm. Why can't I stop you? Big Yellow's dog face was gloomy. You come and go as you please. Punisher, do you really think that no one can suppress you? Then let's fight. The plain-clothed man answered without hesitation, and his calmness revealed an incomparable strength. Fight? Are you sure? At this time, an extremely arrogant and conceited voice sounded in the 9th level of the Purgatory of Darkness. For words, a simple sentence. It gave people the feeling of a king looking down on the world and the arrogance of looking down on all living beings. At this moment, the heavens and the earth became silent, and the lightning in this forbidden zone became still. The void and airflow became silent, as if they were submitting. Then, a figure that was lonely like a mountain appeared in the field. He wore a black robe with wide sleeves, and his long hair was loose. The outline of his face was sharp, and he was handsome to the point of being impeccable. His eyes were deep, indifferent, and calm, and the corners of his eyes seemed to have been carved by time. No one knew how he came here, but when he appeared, he seemed to have become the ruler of this world, and he seemed to be in control of the heavens and the earth. The old copper tree that was originally trembling on the ground rolled his eyes and fainted. The drunkard stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Greetings, my lord." He was respectful and submissive. Big Yellow let out a cheerful howl and kept wagging his tail around the legs of the black-robed man. He even used his head to rub against the black-robed man from time to time. He was affectionate, flattering, and docile. He didn't have any arrogance at all. Ming Zi's entire body trembled while his countenance turned ghastly pale, and he almost fell to the ground. The feeling this black-robed man gave him was simply like his father who'd stepped foot into the supreme state of the Emperor realm when he was young, and it was boundless and supreme. This was completely a form of absolute suppression in terms of mental state, soul, cultivation, and realm. It was a shapeless and great might, just like how a deer and rabbit were innately afraid of lions and tigers. On the other hand, Mingzi knew that he was far inferior to a deer and rabbit, and he was like an ant at most. On the other hand, the black-robed man was far superior to lions and tigers, and it couldn't be described with a comparison at all. The plain-clothed man's palm pressed onto Mingzi's body, and only then was Mingzi able to prevent his mental state from collapsing and recover from that almost suffocating state of despair. When he looked at the black-robed man once more, Mingzi's eyes carried deep fear and terror. Who's this fellow? How could he be so terrifying? At the same time, Lin Sun had already guessed the identity of the black-robed man, and his heart surged. Before he came to the dark world, he'd always been curious about exactly what sort of person this second senior brother, that senior sister Ruo Su addressed respectfully was. Later on, when he arrived at the dark world, he gradually found out that his second senior brother was the master of Bronze Sparrow Pavilion, the legendary overlord that was arrogant to the bone and looked down on everyone. In the eyes of the people of the world, he was the most arrogant person in the world since ancient times until now. The weight of the great Tao couldn't crush his lofty character, and he didn't lose the slightest bit of his arrogance, even when the whole world was his enemy. He was also the only dark magnate that refused to pay a visit to Emperor Shur. This series of cognition caused Lin Sun to have an involuntary impression of respect and admiration towards his second senior brother since a long time ago. The so-called looking up to a high mountain was nothing more than this. However, Lin Sun still hadn't imagined that he would meet his second senior brother under such circumstances in the 9th level of the Purgatory of Darkness. For a time, he couldn't help but be stunned. The black-robed man before him was completely different from the other senior brothers and sisters of Mount Hart. He seemed to be ordinary, yet every single move he made, even his gaze and posture, carried a type of arrogance. The feeling he gave others was that he was absolutely conceited and strong. It seemed as if the sun, moon, and stars would dim down before him. The mountains and rivers of the world would grovel beneath his feet, and the grand chaos of the past and present could only lower their heads before his lofty character. This was the second disciple of Mount Hart, Zhong Qiu. Chapter 22:31. The plain-clothed man was silent for a long time and said, "Since you're here, there's no need to fight anymore." Lin Sun was shocked. He had already experienced the strength of the plain-clothed man before. Even the drunkard and Goldie didn't change his will at all. But the appearance of the second senior fellow apprentice changed everything. There was no need to fight anymore, because he thought there was no chance of winning with the appearance of the second senior fellow apprentice. It could be imagined how powerful the second senior fellow apprentice was. This was what surprised Lin Sun. "If you don't fight anymore, let's talk about how to solve this matter." The second senior fellow apprentice said calmly, "First, I will abide by the agreement of that year and won't kill you. Second, since this man is a descendant of the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor, I can give him a way out. Third, if the first two conditions are met, will my junior fellow apprentice agree or not?" At the end of his words, Zhong Qiu looked at Lin Sun with arrogance on his face, but there was a trace of gentleness in his eyes. He nodded to Lin Sun. Lin Sun cupped his hands, "Greetings, second senior fellow apprentice." Zhong Qiu nodded and looked at the plain-clothed man again. "You make a decision." He was never a person who liked to talk nonsense. The plain-clothed man was silent for a moment and said, "I can leave my swordsmanship and give it to your junior fellow apprentice." Zhong Qiu was stunned and seemed to be a little surprised. The drunkard and Goldie were both surprised. Sky Punisher, a horrible existence suppressed in the 18th level of the Dark Purgatory. At the beginning of primitive times, Sky Punisher was the first sword master in the Dark World, a legendary figure as famous as Tai Xian's Sword Emperor. It was said that Sky Punisher was a congenital creature born in the chaotic Styx, just like the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor. He had mastered the supreme swordsmanship when he was conscious. His strength had been proved in the first Oblivion Tribulation. Even if he had been trapped in the 18th level of the Dark Purgatory for countless years, he was still strong enough to suppress the ancestor of the Emperor. It was amazing that such a horrible existence was willing to leave his swordsmanship inheritance in order to solve the problem related to the Underworld child. "You did this not just to save the descendant of the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor, right?" Zhong Qiu said. He vaguely guessed something. "Yes." The plain-clothed man nodded frankly. He didn't explain. Zhong Qiu didn't ask further. He just looked at Lin Sun and said, "Junior brother, what do you think?" Lin Sun said without hesitation, "The spiritual root of Kunwu Divine tree must be kept, and everything else is up to you." Zhong Qiu nodded. Kunwu Divine, tree divine, soul root. Underworld child was stupefied. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning. For the sake of subduing this creature, he had paid quite a bit of effort and paid a great price. It wasn't exaggerated to say that the reason he'd come to the Purgatory of Darkness this time was to obtain this treasure. For him, Lin Sun's request was like cutting off his flesh. Sure, the plain-clothed man agreed without hesitation. Dark Child's expression changed indeterminately. He discerned as well that he and the man were like fish on a chopping board at this moment, and if they wanted to live, then they could only be seized at will. This smelting god pot. As soon as Lin Sun opened his mouth, Ming Child roared, "I would rather die than give this treasure away." "Junior brother, it's best not to be tainted by the karma of this treasure, Zhong Xiu reminded him. Lin Sun said with a smile, I just said it casually. In fact, he had some regrets in his heart. The power of the smelting god pot was absolutely no less than that of the Tower of Endless Tao. That's it. The plainclothed man made a decision. Before long, the plainclothed man left with Underworld Child and disappeared from the 9th level of the Purgatory of Darkness. Before leaving, he left all his swordsmanship inheritance in a jade slip, and, at the same time, he also left the spiritual root of Kunwa Divine Tree. Before leaving, Underworld Child was in a daze. His livid and gloomy face was full of unwillingness, but in the end, he didn't say a word. Lin Sun knew that after experiencing such a thing, this guy might hate him completely. If they met again in the future, he would definitely take revenge. However, Lin Sun was not afraid. Instead, he faintly looked forward to the next time they met. How many treasures would this boy of wealth get for him? The drunkard and Goldie left first. Both of them knew that the two brothers would have something to say next. The thunder was rolling, but it was as docile as a cub. This world was full of peace. In the distant thunder pool, the Kunwa Divine Tree, which was as red as fire copper, had already been annihilated in the thunder pool. Its spiritual root had been taken away by Underworld Child before, and now it fell into Lin Sun's hands. Standing on the side of the thunder pool, Zhong Xiu was silent for a moment, and then said, Originally, I planned to meet you after the Nirvana heaven ended, but it's okay to meet you now. Lin Sun stood beside and listened in silence. He could see that this second senior fellow apprentice was not a person who liked to ask about others' well-being. Sit down. Zhong Xiu glanced at Lin Sun and took the lead to sit down cross-legged. Lin Sun didn't stand on ceremony. He sat on the other side with a calm look. Your state of mind may be the reason why you defeated the cauldron. You are much stronger than me at that time. Zhong Xiu's voice sounded slowly. That's good. The successor of Mountain of Mind and Heart should be like this. As Master said to first senior brother, a disciple doesn't need to be inferior to his master. In my opinion, as the last disciple to enter Mountain of Mind and Heart, you should be stronger than us senior brothers and sisters with the mantle of Tao left by Master. Hearing this, Lin Sun asked, So, I have been recognized by senior brother? Zhong Xiu was stunned. It seems that you still want to compete with me. Lin Sun laughed. If I don't want to compete with you, how can I be recognized by senior brother? Of course, recognition is only the first step. In the future, Zhong Xiu said, What about in the future? Lin Sun looked into Zhong Xiu's eyes and said seriously, A disciple doesn't need to be inferior to his master, and a junior fellow apprentice doesn't need to be inferior to senior brother. Zhong Xiu finally laughed at this moment. He seemed to be very satisfied with Lin Sun's answer, and said, I'll wait for the day when you surpass me. After that, the two of them chatted for a long time. Lin Sun finally knew something. For example, Sky Punisher was a red fish born in the chaotic Nether River. He was born to control Supreme Sword Tao, and he was a legendary figure of the same era as the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor. Sky Punisher and the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor were very close, but because of the different Tao they pursued, they parted ways in the end. The reason why Sky Punisher protected the Underworld Child was that although he and the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor pursued different Tao, he had always regarded the Underworld Child as his own nephew because of their friendship in the past. The reason why Sky Punisher was trapped here was actually related to the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor. After the first Oblivion Tribulation broke out, Sky Punisher, the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor, the Taishian Sword Emperor, and other supreme figures of the ancient times all came to the Dark World. They wanted to seize a part of the world source that belonged to the Dark World. In the end, the Taishian Sword Emperor and the others won. Sky Punisher was suppressed by the Oblivion Tribulation in order to save the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor, and was trapped in this dark purgatory. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. Didn't Sky Punisher and the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor part ways? Why did he still risk his life to save him? They parted ways because they walked different paths, but this didn't affect their friendship in the past. Zhong Xiu said, It's precisely because of this that I rather admire Sky Punisher's strength of character. He's just like his sword Dao, extraordinary and broad-minded. If I was at my prime, then I would have to pay a price to defeat Sky Punisher. As he finished speaking, his voice carried a trace of emotion. His strength of character caused even second senior brother to rather admire him. This obviously showed that Sky Punisher was indeed an extraordinary existence. In next to no time, Lin Sun understood a shocking secret. It turned out that when the first Oblivion Tribulation descended all those years ago, the Taishian Sword Emperor and the other great figures of the ancient times came to the Dark World to fight for the world's source. And it was the domain of extinction that had once appeared in the ancient Desolation domain. According to Zhong Xiu, the Taishian Sword Emperor and the others had done this all those years ago for none other than the sake of preserving the world source that belonged to the Dark World. And they hoped that the Dark World would be able to recover to its original state after the Oblivion Tribulation ended. But the outcome proved that under the Oblivion Tribulation, the Dark World had completely fallen into oblivion, and it was impossible for it to recover. When the 10 Path battles broke out, and the Forbidden Order energy from the other side of the Starry Sky covered the ancient Starry Sky path, the world source that was obtained from the Dark World had come in handy. That was the absolute domain. It should be known that under the cover of the Forbidden Order energy, the ancient Desolation no longer had an absolute path to the Tao to seek. But the appearance of the absolute domain had left behind hope for the ancient Desolation. After understanding all this, Lin Sun had solved the doubts that had been hidden in his heart for many years. No wonder the absolute domain was said to be a supreme opportunity that had never been seen since ancient times. It turned out that this world was formed from the world source energy of the Dark World. No wonder the inheritances of Combat Emperor Wu Yang, Taishian Sword Emperor, Immortal Incineration Chen Linkong, and other supreme figures were hidden in the absolute domain. It turned out that this was left behind by the Taishian Sword Emperor and the others. It was precisely because of the absolute domain that Lin Sun had stepped onto the absolute path to the Tao and possessed the resources to compete with the myriad of geniuses in the world. It was also because of the absolute domain that the situation of the ancient Desolation had been rewritten and many supreme figures had emerged. Thinking of this, Lin Sun could not help but sigh in his heart. What the Taishian Sword Emperor and the others had done was absolutely a great contribution. It was hard not to admire them. Lin Sun could not help but ask, "Senior brother, where are the Taishian Sword Emperor and the others now?" The other side of the Starry Sky. Zhong Qiu's answer was simple. The other side of the Starry Sky again. Lin Sun was stunned. He had talked a lot with Zhong Qiu, and some of the doubts in his heart had been answered one by one. For example, the appearance of the nirvana of freedom, which even the Forbidden Order energy could not interfere with and destroy. For example, Shi Tiandi from the other side of the Starry Sky could not return from the ultimate in a short period of time. For example, the result of the battle between Shi and the purple-clothed woman, Yin Xing. However, there were also some questions that Zhong Qiu could not answer. For example, where was Master Lu, who used to be the owner of the Hidden Mist House? P.S. This chapter buried another trap about the absolute domain and the Taishian Sword Emperor and the others. Chapter 2232. Soon, Lin learned from the second senior brother that Mingzi had the opportunity to enter the Purgatory of Darkness with the help of Punisher. Moreover, the entrance was located on the 18th level of the Purgatory of Darkness. Before Punisher left, he left his inheritance of swordsmanship, which surprised me. But after thinking about it, I vaguely guessed something. Zhong Qiu talked about Punisher again. After the first Oblivion, Punisher suffered a serious injury. It's not easy for him to hold on until now. This time, in order to save Mingzi, Punisher used all his strength to cross the rules of order of the Purgatory of Darkness. If I'm right, it won't be long before he dies. Speaking of this, Zhong Qiu's voice was a little low, as if he felt sorry for Punisher. Lin Sun was not calm either. Was it worth it to pay such a price to save a Mingzi? Zhong Qiu continued. Punisher never married or accepted any disciple in his life. He walked on a road of Tao alone. His swordsmanship has long been qualified to establish his own orthodoxy. Now, he has a premonition that his death is coming. He won't be willing to see his lifelong pursuit of swordsmanship be lost. So he chose you. Zhong Xiu stared at Lin Sun. In addition to this reason, more importantly, you inherited the mantle of Taishian Sword Emperor. This is the reason why Punisher was willing to give you his swordsmanship. Senior Taishian? Lin Sun was a little surprised. Yes, Taishian was known as the first sword emperor in the Archean era. Among the swordsmanship giants of the same era, no one could compete with him except for Punisher. Zhong Xiu said, at that time, Punisher was known as the first swordmaster in the Dark World. The power of his swordsmanship could be described as everything becomes nothing under one sword. Punisher's only wish was to compete with Taishian Sword Emperor to see whose swordsmanship could be called the best in the world. Taishian agreed readily. The two agreed to discuss swordsmanship on Mount Wu Air in the Dark World. Back then, this matter caused an incomparably great stir in the world, and even Master heard of it. He laughed and said that although these two people pursued different sword daos, they could both be said to be the best in the world, and it was indeed difficult to judge who was stronger. Back then, I accompanied Master and inferred the great Tao in the sinkhole. I also heard of this matter and planned on watching the two of them exchange swords. Unfortunately, the tribulation of oblivion erupted too suddenly and swiftly all those years ago, causing the two peerless sword emperors that originally had the opportunity to spar to be unable to truly compete in the end. When he reached there, Zhong Qiu seemed to feel rather regretful. He gently patted his knee as a sense of loss appeared on his face. Listening to these ancient stories, Lin Sun's heart was filled with longing and thoughts. One was the #1 sword emperor of the immemorial era, Taishian. One was Sky Punisher, the top sword venerable in the Dark World. The sword competition that was originally about to take place on Mount Erlang was unable to be carried out because of the tribulation of oblivion, and it was truly too regretful. Do you understand now? Punishing Sky Punisher, choosing you was the right choice. He looked down on everyone else. Zhong Xiu said, otherwise, the Darkchild would have obtained his inheritance long ago. The Tao cannot be imparted lightly, but when imparting the Tao, there will be no concealment. As he spoke, he passed the jade slip left behind by punishing Sky Punisher to Lin Sun. Lin Sun received it, yet didn't look through it anxiously, and he asked instead, Senior brother, do you think exactly who is stronger between Senior Taishian and Senior Punisher? Zhong Xiu thought for a moment before shaking his head. Even their master, the master of Mount Fengsuan, was unable to give an answer, so it wasn't appropriate for him to make a rash judgment. However, he still said, Junior brother, I can only tell you that it's extremely difficult to determine who's stronger after attaining a realm like theirs. Unless one possesses an absolutely suppressive strength, otherwise, it's extremely difficult to even defeat the other. What about you, senior brother? Asked Lin Sun. Zhong Xiu was stunned, and then he said with a smile, I can't brag about myself before you, but I can tell you that since the ancient times until now, the only thing that can make me lower my head isn't the Grand Tao, nor is it anyone else but our master. Only before our master would I be willing to lower my head. The meaning behind his words was that besides the master of Mount Fengsuan, no one in this world could make him, Zhong Xiu, lower his head. Even eldest senior brother can't do it? Lin Sun couldn't help but ask. Zhong Xiu seemed to have expected that Lin Sun would ask this question, and he said without hesitation, No, it was merely 2 words, yet it seemed to be a matter of course. Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Only now did he realize that this second senior brother's vision and mental fortitude were far greater than he'd imagined. After a moment of silence, Zhong Xiu said, Eldest senior brother's Tao is to fight without end and never admit defeat. I just want to see if there's an end to the Grand Tao in this world. As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and said, There's still a period of time before the arrival of the 3rd tribulation of oblivion. Junior brother, do you intend to go out for a walk or continue cultivating here? Lin Sun thought for a moment and chose to stay. Zhong Qiu nodded. This place is covered in Kunwu lightning fire, and the nearby lightning pools are filled with Kunwu lightning liquid, so it's rather suitable for cultivation. I'll come again when the nirvana of freedom descends. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and vanished on the spot. The lightning pools surged with dazzling and resplendent lightning, and the lightning that covered this expanse of the heavens and the earth seemed as if it had recovered from its deathly stillness and was suffused with a destructive aura. Lin Sun sat alone, his mood fluctuating. There weren't any great twists and turns in this trip to the purgatory of darkness, but he encountered many things along the way. On the first day, he entered the first level. He met Bo Chuan. After they entered the second level, he suppressed Meng Xingzi and seized half of the Great Wei Empyrean spear from him. On the fourth level, he met the cunning man in Cyan, from whom he learned that the other half of the Great Wei Empyrean spear was in the hands of the Ghost Emperor Silverbat on the seventh level. On the fifth level, he met the warm-hearted Hualan for Lin Sun. The real training started from the sixth floor. It was also on this floor that he encountered many Emperor-level vile souls. It wasn't until he entered the seventh level and killed the Ghost Emperor Silverbat that Lin Sun finally confirmed that he could kill a third-level Emperor Realm Fierce Spirit if he went all out. The eighth level was a world that made Lin Sun's state of mind and will undergo earth-shaking changes. On this level, he entered the Tao-forbidding field and spent nearly 3 months to defeat the wills left by 36 powerful figures in ancient times. His state of mind and soul also underwent 36 transformations. At last, he broke the Tao-forbidding field and broke the record set by the second senior brother. The land of Lin Sun's divine soul was the furnace of will. The land of mind was the abyss of heart. This was unprecedented since ancient times. On the ninth level, the scenes Lin Sun encountered were undoubtedly the most incredible and soul-stirring. Ming Child, the first sword venerable in the Dark World, the drunkard, Goldie, and the second senior brother appeared one after another. Although they didn't experience any training, Lin Sun learned a lot of secrets. Until now, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion when he thought of what had happened during this period. No matter what, the trip to the purgatory of darkness this time could be said to be fruitful. Apart from the transformation of his strength, he had the Great Wei Empyrean Spear, the divine soul root of the Kunwu Divine Tree, the inheritance of Sword Tao from Sky Punisher, numerous source crystals of the Great Wei, Kunwu Thunder Liquid. Of course, there were also the numerous Emperor weapons he plundered from Ming Child. According to the second senior brother, it's less than half a year before the third tribulation of Oblivion descends. In the remaining time, I should naturally cultivate the Great Wei and martial Tao to the extreme. Lin Sun pondered calmly. He was extremely persistent to become an emperor in the extreme way, and he even wished for nothing more than to break through now. But he was even more aware that he was still lacking before breaking through. Once he couldn't help but break through, it was very likely that something unexpected would happen. The slightest difference could lead to a great error. In front of the barrier of becoming an emperor, Lin Sun would absolutely not allow himself to make the slightest mistake. Get up. Lin Sun stepped forward and kicked the old copper tree, who was sleeping on the ground, awake. Ah! The old copper tree seemed to wake up from a dream, and it had a blank expression on its face. After a while, it finally realized that those terrifying existences that made it despair had left. Do you plan to stay here and cultivate, or leave? Lin Sun asked. Along the way, the old copper tree had performed well, so Lin Sun didn't mind giving it a chance. Of course I'll stay. The old copper tree's eyes were fanatical, and it answered resolutely. This thunder and lightning forbidden zone was originally left by the Kunwu Divine Tree. Now that the Kunwu Divine Tree was gone, it completely had the opportunity to occupy the magpie's nest. Lin Sun didn't refuse and pointed to the distance. This pool of Kunwu Thunder liquid is useful to me. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, the old copper tree rushed over. Taoism Pier. I'll help you collect it. It seemed so attentive, cheerful, excited, and full of fighting spirit. Lin Sun looked at this scene silently and said in his heart, I hope you can transform into a real and complete Kunwa divine tree in the future. From this day on, Lin Sun began to seclude himself in this thunder and lightning forbidden zone. Every time, in addition to comprehending the Great Way, he would go to fight and kill the law phantoms that emerged from this thunder and lightning forbidden zone. 1 month later, Lin Sun got up from meditation, put his hands behind his back, and looked up at the sky. In his deep black eyes, there was a faint surge of sharp sword chi. After a long silence, he raised his right hand and made a sword-drawing gesture in the void. It was extremely slow, as if what he was grabbing was not nothingness, but a sword sealed between heaven and earth. This thunder and lightning forbidden zone suddenly trembled. In the center of the distant thunder pool, the old copper tree, which was rooted in meditation, trembled all over and opened its eyes. An indescribable cold current of danger stimulated its heart to tremble. Lin Sun looked calm and focused, and his right hand slowly pulled out an inch in the void. Clang! A wisp of sword sound surged. In an instant, as if the ages were disturbed, the 9th level of the purgatory of darkness began to tremble. Chapter 2233. Thunder and lightning surged, and the law of law intertwined. The void was in disorder. A huge mountain made of surging lightning suddenly descended from the sky. On that lightning mountain, there were many palaces with richly ornamented beams and painted rafters. There were also flowers and ancient trees growing everywhere, all of which were formed from the law of lightning. Boom! The world shook. The power of this thunder mountain was no weaker than the 2nd level of the Emperor realm. The destructive aura was even more shocking. In the eyes of ordinary cultivators, such a lightning mountain was simply no different than a heavenly tribulation. The old copper tree's pupils shrank, and he was about to help. Over the past month, whenever Lin Sun meditated, the old copper tree would take the initiative to protect Lin Sun and shield him from the thunder. But this time, just as the old copper tree was about to help, clang, another sword chime rang out like a dragon's roar. The sound alone shook the old copper tree to the point of coughing up blood. He was an Emperor realm evil soul, but at this moment his mind was shaken by the sword chime, and he was affected. In the void, the dazzling thunder mountain suddenly stagnated and trembled. At this time, Lin Sun's right hand pulled out 2 inches. The sword aura was as dazzling as the sun, brilliant to the point of magnificence. Lin Sun's clothes were fluttering in the wind. He looked more focused and calm, and the sword intent in his eyes seemed to be about to erupt. Boom! The thunder mountain roared, surrounded by the terrible power of thunder and lightning, and continued to kill. At this moment, Lin Sun pulled out 3 inches of sword aura. The sword chime was like a tide, like the divine voice of the 9th heaven, like the roar of the gods. The descending thunder mountain suddenly shook violently in the void, as if it had been struck by an invisible hand from below. Lin Sun looked up, and the 3-inch sword aura in his palm shot out 1,000 feet of sharp light and slashed in the void. Swish! The majestic thunder mountain was cut in half like tofu and collapsed in midair. The palaces on it collapsed, and the flowers and ancient trees were crushed into powder. In the end, the thunder mountain, which was formed by the supreme law of thunder and had the power of the 2nd level of the Emperor realm, turned into a rain of thunder and disappeared in the sky above Lin Sun's head. 3 inches of sword aura, 1,000 feet of sharp light, cleaving 100 zhong, thunder mountain. In the distance, the old bronze tree was stupefied. He was shocked by the power of this sword, and his mind was shaken. Lin Sun lowered his head and looked at his palms, his eyes shining with extraordinary splendor. A 3-inch edge meant eternal silence between life and death. This sword strike was called 3 inches solitude. Phew, after a long time, Lin Sun exhaled a long breath of turbid air. This sword was performed with his utmost strength and integrated with his will and cultivation. It seemed simple, but it actually contained all sorts of profound principles. There was the extreme release of one's great Tao, the perfect use of one's cultivation, the concentrated concentration of one state of mind and will. This sword strike contained the profundities of battle, the essence of eternity and flawlessness. With a 3-inch edge, the sword was pulled out of the void. It was extremely simple, extremely wonderful. Similarly, although the power of this sword was unprecedented, Lin Sun had to pay 30% of his own strength. That was to say, with Lin Sun's current strength, he could only make 3 strikes at most. Lin Sun sat cross-legged on the ground, trying to comprehend the subtle mystery of the previous sword strike. 3 Inch of Solitude was recorded in the sword inheritance left by Sky Punisher. In fact, Sky Punisher's sword inheritance was only divided into 3 levels. They were sword drawing, sword commanding, and heart sword. Sword drawing, also known as sword drawing Tao, required the sword to be drawn out of the sheath, ready to strike, anticipate the enemy's moves, and attack first. Once the sword was drawn, life and death would be determined. Sword drawing Tao was divided into 3 levels, namely 3 Inch of Solitude, 6 Inch of Mortality, and 9 Inch of Mortality. Sword commanding, also known as sword commanding Tao, required the sword to be free and unrestrained. Sword commanding Tao was divided into great beauty without words, great ingenuity without work, and elephant invisible. Heart sword was the heart sword Tao. At this level, there was only one core meaning. The heart was like the sword, and the sword was like my heart. Under one sword, everything in the world would become nothing. The sword drawing path, the sword controlling path, and the sword path of the heart were combined to form a supreme path of the sword that Zhu Kong had spent his entire life creating. This inheritance was created by Sky Punisher, so it was called Sword Scripture of Sky Punisher. Lin Sun had just comprehended this inheritance not long ago, and he just understood the mystery of Sword Scripture of sword drawing, 3 Inch of Solitude. But it could be foreseen that as time went by, his understanding of Sword Scripture of Sky Punisher would become more and more profound and exquisite. Lin Sun had long understood that all the inheritances in the world were like this. First, it was the first step, then the next level, and then the time of perfection and perfection. Until he completely grasped this inheritance, he was qualified to master it thoroughly, carry on the past, and finally surpass the master. On the 18th level of Purgatory of Darkness, Sky Punisher sat on the ground in plain clothes, looking focused and calm. When he saw the 3-inch blade that appeared on the 9th level, there was a trace of indescribable complexity in his eyes. There was surprise, relief, and relief. He sat alone in the darkness, and his thin and weak figure gradually became blurry. In the end, he transformed into a scarlet and translucent rain of light that sprinkled down. In a trance, he seemed to go back to the chaos, and a red fish swayed in the Styx River with the rolling waves, so happy. 2 months later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. With a move of his mind, the Chaos Tao territory emerged. It was obscure and dim, and the light of Tao flowed within. The Chaos Tao territory was the embodiment of Lin Sun's power of Tao. It was immeasurably vast, immeasurably deep, and infinitely changeable. As Lin Sun operated his own power of Tao, various visions emerged in the Chaos Tao territory. It was like a magnificent and grand world was born, evolving and evolving. Mountains and rivers, the landscape, the rotation of the 4 seasons, and the vicissitudes of life all emerged in it. The chaos was one. One gave birth to 2, and 3 gave birth to all things. Taoism pure. Have you already become an emperor? The old copper tree in the distance said in a trembling voice in disbelief. In his eyes, the law of Tao that Lin Sun controlled at the moment was full of the wonder of the emperor realm and had the supreme charm. Hearing this, Lin Sun could not help but laugh. What do you think? The old copper tree stared carefully for a long time and said with a blank face, "This is obviously the power of the law of Emperor Realm, but why doesn't your aura belong to the real Emperor Realm?" Strange, it's too strange. The law controlled by the quasi-Emperor Realm was the incomplete law of Emperor Realm. This was something that was known to all since ancient times. But Lin Sun, with the cultivation of Quasi-Emperor, was able to control the law that could only be mastered by the real Emperor realm. This was undoubtedly too incredible. You don't understand. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun answered. There was no way to explain this kind of thing. Should he tell the old copper tree that the power of Tao that Lin Sun controlled had reached the level of perfection, and that was why there was such a perfect and grand scene? The old copper tree was embarrassed. Lin Sun's words were indeed a blow to him, but he really did not understand. Thinking about it, the old copper tree felt like he was about to collapse. It felt like the Tao that he had been searching for all his life had been completely subverted, and there was an indescribable sense of loss. Before, he did not know that there was someone in this world who could surpass the Emperor realm and kill an Emperor realm expert. Before, he had never heard of anyone in this world who could control the power of law that was not inferior to the Emperor realm at the peak of the Quasi-Emperor realm. But all this had never happened before, and now it was happening to a young man. It was like an impossible miracle had happened right in front of him. Lin Sun did not care about the old copper tree's feelings. He felt the changes of the law of Tao around him, but his mind was thinking about something else. Now, the only thing left was that his martial arts cultivation had not reached the level of perfection. 3 months later, boom, a thunderous roar resounded. In the thunder and lightning forbidden zone, Lin Sun's figure floated down from the void. In the place where he left, a huge python dragon formed from the law of thunder, whose power was comparable to the 3rd level of the Emperor realm, exploded inch by inch. Colorful lightning flashes scattered like rain. Standing on the bank of the thunder pool, Lin Sun's eyebrows revealed a touch of invincibility. There was no limit to martial arts, but in the Quasi-Emperor realm, his martial arts had been tempered to the extreme of perfection. If he wanted to go further, he could only choose to break through the realm. At this point, Lin Sun's cultivation, state of mind, willpower, power of the Tao, and power of martial arts had all reached the peak of this realm. This realm could be called the Great Perfection. The old copper tree was startled once again. He looked at Lin Sun in the distance, his clothes fluttering in the wind. His figure was outstanding, and his aura was like a flawless jade, mellow and ethereal. There was no aggressive sharpness, no oppressive strength, and no aura. There was only a kind of indifference and calmness that had been washed clean of all things. Looking from afar, no one would have realized that this was an unprecedented and heaven-defying existence in the peak Quasi-Emperor realm. Even more so, no one would have known that such an indifferent young man had mastered the ultimate combat power that could destroy the law of thunder that had the power of the 3rd level of the Emperor realm. In fact, although the old copper tree's guess was not accurate, it was not far from it. At least, if Lin Sun encountered the Silver Bat Ghost Emperor again, he was absolutely confident that he could use his own cultivation to suppress the opponent in a head-on confrontation. After pondering for a long time, Lin Sun woke up from his thoughts. Looking at the old copper tree in the thunder pool, he said, "I'm leaving." The old copper tree was startled and asked subconsciously, "Where are you going?" "To break through the realm." Lin Sun's answer was concise and to the point. Everything was ready except for the east wind. What he was going to seek next was the road to breaking through the realm. "I'm looking forward to the day you become a Kunwa divine tree." Lin Sun smiled and waved at the old copper tree, then turned and left. "My friend, my Taoist name is Huao." The old copper tree shouted, as if he wanted Lin Sun to firmly remember him. "Transform into Kunwa." "That's right. I'll remember." Lin Sun gradually walked away, his voice drifting in the lightning-covered world. Watching him leave, the old copper tree suddenly felt a surge of reluctance. He knew that he would never forget this legendary, dazzling young man for the rest of his life. He just didn't know whether such a young man could continue to write a legend on the starry ancient path and embark on a road that could subvert the world's cognition. The old copper tree thought to himself, "He can. There are countless geniuses in this world, but a person like him is destined to be unparalleled, unique." Chapter 2234. A quarter of an hour later. After 6 months of experience, Lin Sun walked out of the purgatory of darkness. "Hey, the boy is out. Next to the entrance of the purgatory of darkness, the drunkard, Yellow, and Qing Ying, who had been waiting there, were all alarmed when they saw Lin Sun's figure appear. "Why didn't you break through and become an emperor?" Yellow looked at Lin Sun and couldn't help revealing a trace of disappointment. Originally, he thought that after 6 months of experience, Lin Sun should be able to break through. Just like his second senior brother, he killed his way to the 9th level and became an emperor. But it was obvious that Lin Sun did not break through. "It's not that I don't want to, but I don't want to," Lin Sun said casually. He saw Big Yellow's disappointment, which made him feel amused. When did the arrogant Big Yellow start to care about his cultivation? Yellow said snappily, "What bullshit, don't want to? It's obvious that you can't do it. If you can do it, which fool won't become an emperor?" Lin Sun laughed. "Among us, only you have the ability to fart, the others can't." Yellow's face darkened. Just as he was about to fly into a rage and teach this young man who didn't know how to respect his elders and love his dog, he was stopped by the drunkard. The drunkard said with a strange look in his eyes, "It doesn't matter whether Lin Sun breaks through or not. Don't forget, Silverbat, Ghost Emperor, was killed by him." Lin Sun's aura was indifferent and ethereal. Compared to the past, there was a kind of charm of the Great Way, which made him somewhat unable to see through. This was undoubtedly incredible. It should be known that with his realm, he could see through the details of any quasi-emperor at a glance. "Everyone, Child Lin has returned. Let's go back to the secret place first. The Master of Bronze Sparrow Tower has told us that he will come to see Child Lin as soon as he returns." Qing Ying opened his mouth, and his words made Big Yellow and the drunkard not dare to stay any longer. Immediately, the group returned to the secret place. On the way, Qing Ying told Lin Sun about the sensational events that happened in the Dark World during this period of time. Only then did Lin Sun know that the Dark World had become a big whirlpool and was being watched by all the heavens and earth. The reason was that the third tribulation of oblivion would arrive in less than a month. This calamity was related to rebirth of freedom and the eternal exalted path, and it could be said to affect the hearts of all the great powers in the world. For example, the wondrous Lotus Festival that was held in the Myriad Star City was held for this reason. As time passed, more and more factions from the all heavens of the starry sky came to the world of darkness. Other than the 6 major Dao courts, the 10 war clans, and the primordial imperial clans, there were also ancient clans and orthodoxies from various realms in the universe. This caused the current dark world to seem like a huge whirlpool that was filled with numerous powers and experts. It was completely different from the past. Everything was for the sake of waiting for the arrival of nirvanic freedom. Lin Sun couldn't help but be speechless when he found out about this. A supreme fortuitous encounter related to the eternal exalted path had actually drawn the attention of the entire ancient passageway in the starry sky, and it caused countless ancient powers and sects to participate in it. One could well imagine how intense the competition would be at that time. "Does young master still remember some secrets that I told you?" Qing Ying asked. Lin Sun nodded. Of course, he remembered. Different from other secret realms, nirvanic freedom was very likely to have the law of samsara of time. The test faced by the strong who entered it would also become extremely dangerous. Once one entered the samsara, there were only 2 results. One was to sink into it and lose oneself. The other was to transform to the extreme and realize the grand nirvana of one's own cultivation, so as to get out of the trap. In addition to the test of samsara, nirvanic freedom was also full of extremely terrible, murderous tribulations. There would be the invasion of extraterrestrial demons and the ambush of terrifying figures from the foreign starry sky. All of this was because the eternal exalted path was too terrible. Once someone became the unique lotus on this path, he would have the terrifying foundation of immortal, invincible, unique on the Emperor realm. Just the 8 words immortal, invincible, unique were indeed too heaven-defying, and it was too enviable and crazy. And if one wanted to have the opportunity and qualification to enter nirvanic freedom, when it came, 2 conditions must be met. The first was for the strong who set foot on the extreme path. Regardless of the level of cultivation, Even the practitioners in the lower 5 realms were qualified to enter. The second was for those who set foot on the Emperor realm. As long as their strength was within the 9th level of the Emperor realm, they could enter. Recently, there is new inside information. It is said that after the nirvanic freedom comes, the higher the cultivation of the strong who enters it, the more terrible the danger they will encounter. Qing Ying said, "It is certain that once the strong who is above the 6th level of the Emperor realm enters, they will encounter the most terrible, murderous tribulations in their life. They will be killed by the terrifying figures from the foreign starry sky." According to the analysis of the head of Bronze Sparrow Tower, this inside information should be credible. Therefore, most of the old fellows who were at or above the 6th level of the Emperor realm have retreated and don't dare to get involved. Speaking of this, Qing Ying looked at Lin Sun. This should be good news for you. After all, with your current cultivation, you are not afraid of the 3rd level of the Emperor realm. If you can become an emperor at the peak of nirvanic freedom, you will at least have the ability to protect yourself even if you encounter stronger opponents. Lin Sun heaved a sigh of relief. In the past, Lin Sun had felt extremely pressured. After all, if the powerful 9th level of the Emperor realm also participated in the competition for the nirvanic freedom, who could be their opponent? On the starry sky ancient path, the old monsters who had reached the 9th level of the Emperor realm were few and far between. But when the nirvanic freedom appeared, how could these old monsters resist the temptation of becoming immortal and invincible? Even if other strong cultivators joined in, how could they compete? It was no different from courting death. But now, the inside information revealed by Qing Ying made everyone feel much more relaxed. Why is this so? Lin Sun asked. Qing Ying explained, the 6th level of the Emperor realm is known as lawless. The nirvanic freedom is formed from the original order of the starry sky ancient path. When the 6th level of the Emperor realm enters, their aura will be like a beacon in the fog. They will be immediately targeted by the terrifying figures from the foreign starry sky. The 6th level of the Emperor realm, lawless. Lin Sun finally understood, but another question came to his mind. Miss Qing Ying, what's the matter with those terrifying figures from the foreign starry sky? Qing Ying said, I don't know either. You can ask the Bronze Sparrow Tower Master when you meet him. Lin Sun nodded. After half an hour, they returned to the hidden place. When they arrived, the drunkard and Goldie left, leaving only Qing Ying by Lin Sun's side. The two sat down in a quiet and magnificent hall, drinking tea and chatting. Child, there's something I don't know if I should say, Qing Ying said hesitantly. Lin Sun said, Go ahead. Qing Ying thought for a moment and finally said, Recently, whether it's the Dark World's Holy Light ancient sect, the Hidden Land Realm, or other ancient orthodoxies in the starry sky, they all threaten to kill you if you dare to go to the nirvanic freedom. Lin Sun couldn't help but smile. This is within my expectation. It's not surprising. He had been hunted down countless times over the years, so he didn't care about these things. Qing Ying reminded, Child, don't forget that the world now knows that it's the Bronze Sparrow Tower that protected you. Lin Sun's smile suddenly froze on his face, and he finally realized the problem. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun took a deep breath and said, In order to protect me, my second senior brother must have suffered a great deal of pressure, right? Qing Ying nodded. Nowadays, all the heavens in the starry sky respect Shi Tiandi, and you're the target that Shi Tiandi ordered to capture and kill. What the Bronze Sparrow Tower Master did is no less than putting Bronze Sparrow Tower in a dangerous situation of being the enemy of the whole world. If it weren't for the fear of the Bronze Sparrow Tower's strength and the fact that Shi Tiandi hasn't appeared for a long time, the Divine Sunshine Ancient Sect and the Hidden Land Realm would have already taken action against Bronze Sparrow Tower in this dark world. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed, and his heart felt heavy. Only now did he realize how great the price that his second senior brother had paid to protect him. He didn't even need to think to know that the day Shi Tiandi returned from the ultimate would be the day that Bronze Sparrow Tower would be in trouble. At that time, the Divine Sunshine Ancient Sect and the Hidden Land Realm would definitely act as Shi Tiandi's most loyal minions, taking the opportunity to destroy Bronze Sparrow Tower. Similarly, his second senior brother, Zhong Xiu, would definitely be targeted by Shi Tiandi as a target to be eradicated. And all of this was because of him. Since I'm doing this, I naturally have the confidence and plan to do so. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded outside the hall. It was still so proud and conceited. Zhong Xiu, draped in a black robe with wide sleeves, strolled in. Seeing this, Qing Ying immediately got up, bowed, and left the hall. Ever since Array Emperor Lu left the House of Hidden Fog, this girl seems to have changed into a different person. All these years, she has been cold, quiet, and alone. She only talks so much in front of you. Watching Qing Ying's figure leave, Zhong Xiu couldn't help sighing with emotion. In fact, I still don't understand why Array Emperor Lu didn't recognize Qing Ying as his daughter. This girl's talent is extremely great. She has the spiritual heart of Taoism. If she wasn't addicted to the way of mind tattoo, with her foundation, I'm afraid that her attainments in the Great Way are not inferior to yours. Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. Only then did he realize that he seemed to have ignored Qing Ying's cultivation. The reason was that when she treated him, she had always put her posture very low. Whether it was words or actions, there was a sense of trustworthiness and intimacy. It was just like the spring breeze and rain, nourishing everything silently. Chapter 22:35. He regarded Lin Sun as his younger brother. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a little touched. Qing Ying's green clothes, blood umbrella, an enchanting, beautiful face appeared in his mind again. Let's not talk about this. Zhong Xiu sat down on the ground. I've heard the conversation between you just now. I only have one thing to tell you. Lin Sun also sat down, showing a look of listening. I've been guarding the dark world for countless years. What I've been waiting for is nothing more than this nirvana of freedom. I want to see who on earth can become the unique lotus mentioned by the master. I hope it will be you, but it's just a hope. Zhong Xiu's voice echoed in this quiet hall. What if I'm not? Lin Sun asked. Zhong Xiu thought about it and said, disappointment is inevitable, but it doesn't matter. Who asked you to be my little junior brother? At the end of his words, he couldn't help laughing. It seemed to be a joke, but Lin Sun's heart was in turmoil. He knew very well how great the pressure Zhong Xiu faced in order to protect him was. It was the danger of being regarded as an enemy by the whole world. Zhong Xiu glanced at Lin Sun as if he had seen through his mind. You don't have to worry about it or feel that you owe me anything. This time, no matter how the nirvana of freedom ends, I won't stay in the dark world any longer. So, even if the whole world is my enemy, I'm not afraid. What about the Bronze Sparrow Tower? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. The Bronze Sparrow Tower was one of the 3 giants in the dark world, and its influence had already spread all over the starry sky. As the second senior brother who founded the Bronze Sparrow Tower, wasn't he worried that the Bronze Sparrow Tower would be destroyed? Zhong Xiu smiled and said casually, as long as I'm alive, no one dares to kill the Bronze Sparrow Tower unless they don't want to live. Lin Sun believed this sentence. Second senior brother's strength was undoubtedly powerful. He could be said to be a supreme figure in the all heavens. If he was determined to retaliate, which orthodoxy would not be afraid of him. What about Shi Tiandi? Lin Sun asked. This was what he was most worried about. Zhong Xiu couldn't help frowning and said, Junior brother, do you think your second senior brother is not as good as the first senior brother? Lin Sun smiled bitterly. I dare not. Zhong Xiu said, then it's settled. The previous venerable sovereign, nameless, was suppressed by eldest senior brother. So, this heavenly emperor, sure, will be taken care of by me. His voice was casual, but it was filled with disdain. I didn't come here to talk to you about this. Zhong Xiu arranged his thoughts and said, the rebirth heaven will descend 1 month from now, and all the treasures and external forces in the possession of those that enter it will be restrained and unable to be utilized. This also means that the competition in the nirvana of freedom can only rely on one's own cultivation. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but frown, but soon relaxed. He had many treasures on him, like the Great Tao without End Pagoda and the Kunlun Monarch weapons. All of them could be said to be top-notch treasures. Putting aside all these treasures, the existence of the leaf, Wu Kei, and the broken blade spirit would also be of great help in times of crisis. However, it was obvious that regardless of whether it was those treasures or the powers of Yi and the others, they were all unable to be used in the nirvanic freedom heaven. This undoubtedly meant that Lin Sun had lost some of his trump cards. But similarly, other strong practitioners who entered the nirvana of freedom heaven would face the same situation. Zhong Xiu saw the change of Lin Sun's expression and couldn't help but nod secretly. In the final analysis, the competition for the Great Tao was about one's own cultivation. Besides this, the most mysterious and terrifying thing in the rebirth of freedom is the energy of samsara. This sort of energy of order had only appeared at the very beginning of the primeval times. According to Master, once one gets lost within the cycle of samsara, then no matter how extraordinary one's cultivation is, one's life and death would be beyond one's control, and success or failure would be for naught. Zhong Xiu said seriously, "Junior brother, when you enter it, you must remember that if you encounter samsara, awakening is the most important thing." Lin Sun nodded and suddenly remembered past. In the 8th level of Green Cloud Path in the Heaven Accessing Place, he once entered samsara and floated in another identity for 20 years. Finally, he saw his own body. Was this samsara the same as the power of samsara mentioned by his second senior brother? In addition, what you need to guard against is the foreign attack. What Zhong Xiu said was exactly what Lin Sun wanted to ask. According to Zhong Xiu, the threat from the foreign land was very likely to come from the other side of the starry sky. What kind of world was the other side of the starry sky, and how big that world was? Zhong Xiu couldn't give a clear answer. The only thing he could be sure of was that there was a higher realm than the Emperor realm on the other side of the starry sky, where the power of immortality and eternity existed, as well as the supreme laws of fate and time. Such a world was destined to be far beyond the starry sky, ancient path. In the final analysis, the starry sky, ancient path was just a road to the other side of the starry sky. How could a road be compared with a world? So, the threat from the foreign land is very likely to come from the same place and camp as Shurtiendi. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes slightly. After thinking for a while, Zhong Xiu said, "It's very likely that they come from the same place, but whether they come from the same camp is hard to say. No matter how strong Shurtiendi is, he is just a practitioner. He alone can't represent the whole starry sky." After the emergence of Nirvana Freedom Heaven, the reason why it was targeted by those terrifying existences from the foreign land is because of the immortal Supreme Road. This path is too terrifying. Since the ancient times, there's only such a path. Once someone's able to become that lone lotus that bloomed amidst the eternal oblivion tribulation, then it would be equivalent to possessing the reserves of an exalted exalt on the path to the Emperor realm that was eternal, indestructible, and supreme. If such an anomaly appears, it's enough to arouse the fear of anyone in any world. Speaking of this, Zhong Xiu said, "Junior brother, do you understand now?" Lin Sun nodded. How could he not understand that he had been regarded as an anomaly since he was young? Those hostile forces thought that if they didn't eradicate him, he would become a big trouble in the future. This situation was actually very similar to the path of the eternal exalt, who would watch idly by as a person who was eternal, indestructible, and reigned supreme rose to prominence. Zhong Xiu didn't stay too long and left. Before leaving, he told Lin that after the emergence of Nirvana Freedom Heaven, all the strong who had the qualification to enter, it would sense the way to go as soon as possible. At that time, Lin Sun could go there on his own. From that day onwards, Lin Sun stayed in the hidden place. His cultivation had reached the perfected realm, but he didn't neglect his cultivation. His 5 clones occupied the 5 Organs Palace, each comprehending different Taoist scriptures, while his main body concentrated on studying the ancient books left behind by Master Lu. One was the lifeless killing formation ranked 9th in the heavens, and the other was the incomplete Tao meteorite death formation that was only half deduced but already more terrifying than the lifeless killing formation. Time passed day by day. The atmosphere in the dark world became oppressive. Countless people were silently waiting for the arrival of the third Oblivion Tribulation. Those ferocious people who lived in the dark world had become extremely low-key and almost didn't dare to show their faces. The reason was that there were too many experts from the various forces in the starry sky in the dark world, and there was no lack of Emperor Realm existences among them. I wonder if Lin Sun will participate in the competition for Nirvana Freedom. In Myriad Star City, Miwuya woke up from meditation and suddenly thought of Lin Sun. His originally clear and calm state of mind was stirred. In the past, he was the first on the All Heavens King Sage ranking and had suppressed his peers for 600 years. However, with Lin Sun's appearance, all the glory and records he had set were broken. Even so, Miwuya still admired and respected Lin Sun. As the saying went, "I am not alone in my Tao." He wasn't afraid, even in the chess match with Mi Tian. This time, how could he not be here? Also in the Myriad Star City, Ling Hongzhuang also sighed with emotion in her heart. Although Lin Sun was being hunted by Shi Tiandi in the starry heavens, no one dared to despise and slander him like before. This was the prestige he gained from killing and fighting. Of course, there were many people who thought differently from Miwuya and Ling Hongzhuang. They only had one attitude towards Lin Sun. They wanted Lin Sun dead. Xinyu, don't think about him anymore. You and him are from different worlds. In a city in the world of darkness, Sword Emperor Fufeng of the Jintian clan of the Primordial Emperor clan looked at Jintian Xianyue, who was sitting in a daze by the window. He couldn't help but feel pity for her and sigh. Back on the boat, it was Sword Emperor Fufeng who suggested letting Jintian Xianyue cultivate by Lin Sun's side. But now, Sword Emperor Fufeng felt rather complicated. He suddenly realized that the proudest descendant of the Jintian clan, Jintian Xianyue, who was regarded as the #1 beauty of the White Sovereign Star field, was destined to have no fate with Lin Sun. The difference in their cultivation paths was too great. Even if he exhausted all his strength to chase after Lin Sun, he was destined to drift further and further away. Ancestor, I don't have any improper thoughts about young master. I know that someone like young master will definitely go further and higher on the great Tao in the future. He's not someone I can catch up to. Jintian Xianyue was silent for a moment before saying softly, I'm just a little worried. Apart from Copper Sparrow Pavilion, who else can tolerate him in the all heavens? Her clothes were whiter than snow, and she was incomparably beautiful. Just like before, she was like a fairy, charming and picturesque. After the trip to the ancient immortal forbidden area, she, Xieyuhua, and Lung Xiujia were rescued by Emperor Chan Tu, the master of Ling Kezi. Since then, she had been separated from Lin Sun. Over the years, every time she thought of the time when she followed Lin Sun and wandered in the primordial world, she felt lost and unspeakable depression in her heart. Sword Emperor Fufeng sighed in his heart. Since ancient times, sentiments had led to regrets. How could an old guy like him, who had experienced countless things, not know what Xianyue was thinking? P.S. Tomorrow, Jinyu will try her best to write 8 to 10 chapters. She will stay up late to write tonight and try to write 4 chapters in a row at noon tomorrow. Chapter 2236. Time flew by. Under countless gazes of anticipation, the third tribulation of oblivion in history had arrived in the end. On this day, a layer of black, colored tribulation clouds that were sticky like ink gushed into appearance in the sky above the world of darkness, and it caused the day to instantly fall into the eternal night of darkness. From the beginning until the end, it was completely silent. It's here. It's finally here. Excited voices resounded out from every single area in the various territories of the world of darkness, and countless experts that had been waiting for a long time stopped what they were doing and looked towards the sky in unison. Their expressions were filled with fervor. Time flowed by, and the sky grew darker and deeper. Countless stars gradually appeared in the depths of the black tribulation clouds, and they flickered and flickered like the eyes of the gods that were looking down at the world. A suffocating and oppressive might of the heavens effused out from the depths of the tribulation clouds, and it drowned the entire world of darkness within it. At this moment, no matter how high their cultivations were, the hearts of everyone trembled as they felt supreme might of the heavens. Lin Sun walked out of the palace with his hands behind his back as he looked up into the sky, and his deep and black pupils reflected the changes in the sky, while his expression remained calm. He'd been waiting for this day for a very long time. Bang! It was like the first thunderclap when the chaos was split apart, and it resounded in the sky above the world of darkness amidst this oppressive and deathly silent atmosphere. Everyone felt their souls tremble as if they were struck by a drum of the gods. In this boundless territory and the boundless heavens and the earth, countless cultivators and living beings saw a scene that they couldn't forget in their entire lifetimes at this moment. Within the dark tribulation clouds, the countless stars were like numerous lotus flowers that swayed and bloomed in the sky, and they emanated an obscure and hazy rain of light that seemed like chaos. Those lotuses that seemed to be born from within the chaos covered the sky, and they were so divine, so supreme, and so mysterious. The lotus splits open the universe, the Tao is born within it, and rebirth is the guide to the world of freedom. Zhong Qiu's eyes surged with strands of divine light as he watched this scene from afar. The curtains to this tribulation of oblivion that have been accumulated for countless years will finally be drawn today. Is that the quintessence energy of the world that belongs to the starry sky ancient path? She stood at the side while his graceful figure was hazy like mist, and a rain of light flowed about. Exactly. It's formed from the true order of the grand Tao of this world, and it can be called the true quintessence of the order of the heaven Tao. A hint of emotion could be seen in Zhong Qiu's eyes as he said, "It's a pity that over the past countless years, we can only see some of the original power that belongs to the starry sky's ancient path in the primordial world and the realm of ancient desolation. The ancient desolation realm, the origin of all Taos, was completely shattered by the 10 Directions cultivation war. From then on, the original power of the starry sky was shattered into countless pieces. The grand Tao was incomplete, and that was why the forbidden energy of order that came from the other side of the starry sky had an opportunity to take advantage of." She watched and listened quietly. She was thinking about something. Could Lin Sun become an independent lotus? In the sky, tribulation clouds were like ink, 10,000 lotuses in full bloom. Chaotic energy swayed about, mysterious and boundless. This scene caused the entire world of darkness to be thrown into an uproar. The original power of the heavenly Tao. After so many years, I've finally reappeared in the sky. A few old monsters were excited, their hearts surging. Only these old guys knew how difficult it was to see the original power of order that belonged to the starry sky's ancient path. Do you see that? The entrance to nirvana of freedom is the lotus of the Tao. Many experts of ancient orthodoxies and clans were already eager to take action, their faces full of longing and fanaticism. You must be careful when you head to the rebirth of freedom this time. This unprecedented calamity is filled with unimaginable danger and terror. Some of the elders warned the juniors around them in a serious manner. The sounds of discussion were innumerable. The Emperor Realm, Quasi-Emperor Realm, Saint Realm, Longevity King Realm, the lower 5 realms. So long as the cultivators of every realm possessed the qualifications to participate in rebirth of freedom, then they revealed a feeling of excitement and nervousness at this moment. The path of the immortal supremacy, nirvana of freedom. The tribulation of 10 Directions cultivation war, a lone lotus. Some could undergo rebirth and transformation within it, while others would fall into oblivion and be destroyed within it. This was nirvana of freedom, a mysterious place that the universe had been waiting for countless years. Time passed by. Chaotic chi suffused the sky while countless lotuses of the Tao swayed incessantly and emanated a brilliant rain of light. Suddenly, a figure shot into the sky like a ray of light. It was an old monster at the Emperor realm who possessed an extremely powerful cultivation. He'd sensed the entrance to nirvana of freedom at the first possible moment and charged over. In an instant, he'd charged into one of the lotuses of the Tao, and then he vanished into the depths of the tribulation clouds with the lotus. This scene was witnessed by countless seniors, and it instantly caused them to become restless. In the following period of time, they'd sensed the entrance to nirvana of freedom in succession, and they'd charged into the sky. For a time, rays of light shot up from the boundless world of darkness like rain. They were like dazzling light that tore through the darkness and vanished into the depths of the sky. Every single lotus of the Tao would take away a person. A group of Emperor Realm experts ascending into the sky was a scene that could shock the universe and shake the heavens. How can we compete? Some experts were mentally prepared, but when they saw so many Emperor Realm experts heading towards nirvana of freedom, they couldn't help but feel despair. What could those below the Emperor Realm use to compete? This was indeed an extremely heavy problem. No matter who it is, as long as one enters nirvana of freedom, they'll be able to embark on a path of transformation. There's no need to become a lone lotus. Most people weren't afraid because their goal was different from the Emperor Realm experts. They merely wanted to enter nirvana of freedom and seek rebirth and transformation for their cultivation. I sensed it too. Let's go. Let's go. In the following period of time, dazzling rays of light shot up from various parts of the world of darkness, tearing through the sky and soaring into the sky, especially in the vicinity of Myriad Star City. This was the place where the experts of the 6 great Tao courts, 10 great war clans, and other great powers resided. At this moment, dense streaks of light simply swept up like tide water, and they illuminated the mountains and rivers, causing it to be an extremely magnificent sight. The exact number was impossible to estimate, because as long as one set foot on the path of Tao, regardless of cultivation, they would have a chance to enter nirvana of freedom and seek their own path of rebirth. Today is the day the dragon rises to the heavens. It's time for me to hold my head high. Ha ha, that's it. I'll be leaving first. In a city in the world of darkness, the youthful Xian Jiuyin laughed loudly. He was full of energy, and he was beaming with joy. He was like a wild horse that had escaped its reins as he cheered and soared into the sky. Watching him leave, the Xian family's patriarch, Xian Shangshan, twitched his lips. This kid's temperament. Why isn't it like his father at all? He's simply too damn happy. Don't forget, if you have the chance to see Lin's son, tell him to come to our Xian family in the future. If you dare to forget, I promise I'll break your legs when you return. Xian Shangshan was slightly worried and couldn't help but remind him telepathically. You're really long-winded. Don't worry. Xian Jiuyin's voice was still resounding, but he had already disappeared in the depths of the sky. What are you afraid of? Hurry up. Also in the dark world, Chan Tu Imperial Ancestor, who was as fat as a small mountain, had an anxious expression on his chubby face, as if he was exasperated that Chan Tu Imperial Ancestor had not lived up to his expectations. Beside him, Ling Kezi said with a sad face, Master, I really don't want to go to that damn place. If something happens to you, who will take care of you in your old age? Crack! Chan Tu slapped Ling Kezi's bald head with his palm as big as a cattail leaf fan, and said angrily, Don't worry, I've already divined for you. I guarantee that you'll come back alive. Hurry up. As he said, he waved his hand. Ling Kezi's body, like a stone being thrown away, whizzed through the sky and disappeared in the depths of the sky. Compared with that kid surnamed Lin, you are too cowardly, Chan Tu murmured. In the hidden place, Lin Sun's robe was fluttering, and he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Why don't you take action? Qing Ying came with a rouge-like blood umbrella. Her green skirt was swaying, showing a kind of soul-stirring and enchanting beauty. Lin Sun didn't answer, but asked, I've always been curious. Why do you carry this umbrella around? Qing Ying was silent for a moment, and then said, Formation Emperor Lu said that beauty is a source of trouble. Lin Sun was speechless. What kind of reason was this? When I was young, a man accidentally saw my appearance, and then he was distracted. His Taoist heart collapsed, and he became a waste. Qing Ying said, that man was the grandson of a supreme elder of Mist-Hidden House. He was extremely talented. After his death, many people regarded me as a disaster and wanted to drive me away. Lin Sun suddenly understood and said, then Master Lu gave this blood umbrella to you? Qing Ying nodded. Yes, from then on, no one in this world has seen my appearance, except you. Lin Sun had a strange and absurd feeling in his heart. Was it also a mistake for a person to have unparalleled beauty? Let's go. Without thinking much, Lin Sun waved his hand, and his figure rose into the sky. Take care, child. Watching Lin Sun's figure disappear in the depths of the tribulation cloud, Qing Ying put away the blood umbrella alone. Her beautiful black hair fell down, revealing a beautiful face that could turn all living things upside down. Her green skirt was fluttering, like a fairy or a demon, and her beautiful figure was breathtaking. On this day, the third tribulation of oblivion, which was expected by all, came. The sky was filled with lotus and chaos. The whole world was shocked. In the dark world, strong people from all the forces in the world went there one after another, like a divine rainbow soaring into the sky, shining like rain. Some people wanted to achieve nirvana for themselves. Some people wanted to be a lotus that bloomed alone. On this day, on the other side of the starry sky, the grand sound of Tao resounded. A group of supreme, terrifying creatures were all alarmed and looked over from the other side. Chapter 22:37. Clouds and mist lingered in the void, and an incomparably grand palace stood there. Divine radiance suffused the surroundings while the glow of the Tao enshrouded it, and the mysterious quintessence of the order of the grand Tao descended from the palace like a myriad of strands of divine light. This place was like a palace where gods resided. What a thick origin of the great Tao. Why is there a palace in nirvanic rebirth? There was a hubbub, and countless figures were scattered around the grand palace. They were so densely packed that one couldn't see the end of them. These were all experts who were qualified to enter nirvanic rebirth. However, at this moment, all of them were bewildered and surprised, because as soon as they entered nirvanic rebirth, they were all teleported to this place. Apart from the palace, they couldn't see anything else. There was a vast expanse of mist everywhere, and they couldn't help but feel nervous. Look, that's the descendants of the primitive Tao court. They've gathered together. Someone exclaimed. Many people saw some extraordinary men and women gathered together. They were all cultivators of the untainted land Tao court. The descendants of Panwu, Qinquan, multitude demons, and Xinhuang Tao court are also here. There are also the 10 war clans and some ruthless character from the primordial emperor clans. In the chaotic atmosphere, the experts who came to nirvanic rebirth began to form groups and groups, gathering with their own forces. Nirvanic rebirth was an unknown world that hadn't appeared since the beginning of time. Although there were unimaginable opportunities here, it was also filled with incomparable danger. No one dared to be careless. If they could group together, they wouldn't go alone. As time passed, the atmosphere gradually quieted down, and it was even a bit oppressive. The experts that were scattered in this area came from various forces in the starry sky. There were cultivators of the lower 5 realms, longevity monarchs, sage realm, and quasi-emperors between different realms. There was naturally a natural suppression and threat. Some of the forces were even enemies. Being in the same world, it was no different from meeting enemies. If it wasn't for the fact that they didn't know the situation, they would have already attacked. What was this place? Almost everyone's gazes were sizing up the palace in the distance. They didn't know how tall or big it was, but it was grand and sacred. The power of the Order of the Great Path covered it, and a rain of light sprinkled down, making this divine palace seem extremely mysterious. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't figure it out. If an Emperor Realm expert was here, he might be able to find some clues. Someone couldn't help but whisper, right, where are the Emperors? Someone was shocked. His words woke everyone from their reverie. Only now did everyone realize that there wasn't a single Emperor Realm cultivator in this world. This strange scene caused many people's hearts to tighten. Even the heirs of the 6 great Dao courts and the 10 great battle tribes were startled. Their greatest reliance was the Emperor Realm elders in their sections. They thought that with these elders leading them, they would at least have some protection in this mysterious and unknown nirvana freedom. Who would have thought? Not a single one of their great Emperor elders showed up. This was undoubtedly an unexpected event that no one had expected, and it caused everyone to be even more surprised and bewildered. Whoosh! Suddenly, someone soared into the sky and transformed into a ray of divine light that charged toward the divine palace in the distance. This scene caused many experts to become restless and eager to give it a try. Or rather, they had originally planned to do the same and investigate the divine palace. Slap! Before the figure could even get close, he was struck by a divine chain formed from the Order of the Great Path. His entire body was sent flying, and his head was broken and bleeding. He was in an extremely sorry state. A series of gasps rang out. Everyone recognized that the figure was a peerless boundary emperor from a primordial emperor clan. In this world where no Emperor Realm cultivators had appeared, he could be considered a peak existence. But now, he was sent flying like a fly that couldn't even withstand a single blow. For a time, the place fell silent. The originally restless heroes had extinguished the thought of going forward to investigate. The entrance to Nirvana freedom hasn't closed yet. It's probably not time for the Divine Palace to open yet. Miwia, who had a graceful figure and clear eyes, spoke calmly from the Panwu Dao Court's camp. Let's not talk about anything else. The only thing we can be sure of now is that those who are above the great Emperor Realm should have been moved to another area of Nirvana freedom. All sorts of whispers rang out as everyone waited quietly. Suddenly, someone asked, "Who knows if the most wanted criminal of the starry sky has come?" Although he didn't mention a name, everyone instantly guessed who he was talking about. Their expressions immediately changed. Some people looked at the person who asked the question and realized that he was a peerless boundary emperor from the primitive Dao court called Yuanbin. "If he comes, you'll lose your life just because of what you said." Someone snorted coldly. The experts of the primitive Dao court frowned, and their eyes turned cold. There was actually someone who dared to speak to one of them like that. Was he courting death? In next to no time, they saw the person who spoke. It was a young man with a lazy bearing, a frivolous appearance, and a cultivation base that seemed like that of a youth. Xian Jiuyin, the son of a Xian family's leader. There was a commotion as everyone recognized the identity of the youth in linen. Yu Wenbin coldly said, "In that game of chess, you colluded with that fugitive Shah. Even now, you are still speaking up for him. Could it be that your Xian clan is planning to defy the decree of heavenly monarchship?" With one sentence, he directly put a big hat on Xian Jiuyin. Xian Jiuyin rolled his eyes and pointed at Yu Wenbin. "Just because of what you said, you're dead meat in Nirvana freedom this time." Yu Wenbin's expression became unsightly. Under the watchful eyes of so many people, being pointed at and threatened like this made him feel a little embarrassed. He was just about to say something when he was stopped by his fellow disciples. Almost all the experts of the major forces in the starry sky were scattered in this area. Once they started fighting, it was very likely to cause some unnecessary trouble. Moreover, they hadn't figured out the situation in this world yet. It was undoubtedly unwise to cause trouble rashly. "Trash!" Xian Jiuyin sneered at the other party's silence. He had a look of disdain on his face, angering Yu Wenbin so much that his face turned green and he gritted his teeth. "Don't talk so much." Ling Kezi, who was right next to Xian Jiuyin, couldn't help but remind him, "It's better to be safe than sorry. If a battle really breaks out, I can't help you." Xian Jiuyin said grumpily, "Look at you. Can't you see that I'm fighting for Lin Sun? He's our brother." At this moment, a cold and deep voice sounded. "So you're saying that you're going to stand with that wanted criminal at all costs?" A pale-skinned man dressed in black from the Divine Image Ancient Sect's camp spoke up, his eyes glowing with a strange green divine flame. "Feng Luozi, a peak 3rd-level quasi-emperor." Many people recognized this person, and their eyes narrowed. Although there were experts from all over the starry sky gathered here, there was only a small group of people who could set foot on the peak of the Quasi-Emperor realm. And this Feng Luo Zi was not an ordinary peak Quasi-Emperor. "What does my business have to do with you?" Xian Zhuyin was not afraid at all and spoke in a domineering tone. "That wanted criminal is the enemy of our divine image, ancient sect, and the starry sky. Since you're on his side, you're the enemy of all of us." Feng Luo Zi walked over, his eyes cold and grim. "What's more, this is nirvana of freedom. Do you really think that no one could defeat you just because you're a descendant of the Xian family?" His voice was so cold that the atmosphere in the area became tense. Many experts made way for him, not daring to stand in Feng Luo Zi's way. At this moment, all eyes in the field turned to this side. Yuan Bin and other descendants of the primitive Taoist court couldn't help but gloat. Xian Zhuyin was really stupid. In today's world, who dared to have a relationship with Lin Sun? They couldn't even hide from him. But he, in front of all the heroes, went to fight for Lin Sun, which was obviously jumping into the fire pit himself. "Hey, this guy's gonna fight. Should we retreat first?" Ling Kezi couldn't help saying. "Retreat my ass." Xian Zhuyin stared at Feng Luo Zi, who was walking over, and said casually, "Just stand aside and watch how I'm going to destroy this bastard who's courting death." Bastard? Murderous intent flashed in the depths of Feng Luo Zi's eyes, and his figure suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared in front of Xian Zhuyin and stabbed at Xian Zhuyin's neck with his fingers like a knife that was wrapped in dazzling sharpness. Fast. Unbelievably fast. The attack of a third-step Quasi-Emperor was so powerful and fast that most people in the field couldn't even react in time. Those peerless figures who had the ability to capture this scene couldn't help but shiver in their hearts when they saw it. Xian Zhuyin naturally couldn't just sit and wait for death. Back in the ancient immortal forbidden area, he had also stepped into the third-step Quasi-Emperor realm. Therefore, in the face of Feng Luo Zi's attack, he reacted very quickly, and black and white qi appeared on the fingertips of his right hand that was hidden in his sleeve. However, just as he was about to make his move, Feng Luo Zi's figure suddenly stopped in the void, and his entire body was lifted up like a chick. His face was flushed, and his eyes were filled with shock. He struggled even more frantically, but his cultivation had been firmly restrained, and he couldn't even move his body. The sudden scene caused Xian Zhuyin to be stunned, and it also caused all the experts present to be caught off guard, causing their hearts to tremble. Feng Luo Zi was a third-step Quasi-Emperor, but in the blink of an eye, he was grabbed like a chick. It was also at this moment that the crowd saw the person who had arrived. He was dressed in a moon-white robe, and his black hair was loose. His figure was tall and handsome, and he was as calm as the drifting clouds. "Lin Sun." A cry sounded like a sudden clap of thunder that cut through the silence of the world and reverberated in everyone's heart, causing their expressions to change. That guy who was personally ordered by Heavenly Emperor Sure actually dared to come to the nirvana of freedom? Chapter 2238. Lin Sun. There were not many people in the world who had seen Lin Sun, but his name was known by everyone in the world. Just then, when they found out that the young man who had suddenly appeared and grabbed Feng Luo Zi was the legendary successor of Mount Fengsuan, many people revealed shocked expressions. Mi Wuya, Ling Hongzhuang, Jintian Xianyue, Xian Zhuyin, and Ling Kezi, who were familiar with Lin Sun, were equally surprised. They did not expect Lin Sun to really show up. The atmosphere was silent and oppressive. Countless eyes were locked on Lin Sun at this moment. There was hostility, fear, hatred. There was shock, surprise, and curiosity. Feng Luo Zi's face was as red as a pig's liver, and his eyes were filled with terror. If it was someone else, he would have threatened them with the name of the divine image ancient sect. But it was useless against Lin Sun. All these years, there was no successor of Mount Fengsuan that Lin Sun did not dare to kill, be it on the starry ancient path or in the dark world. Even great Emperor Baki of the divine image ancient sect, who was at the 8th level of the Emperor realm, was killed by Lin Sun. How could Feng Luo Zi not be afraid? He even had a premonition that he was doomed this time. Bang. In the next moment, Feng Luozi was thrown away and fell to the ground like a dead dog, seeing stars. But Feng Luozi was overjoyed. Demon God Lin didn't kill him. The crowd was surprised to see this. It was said that Lin Sun was a decisive and merciless person. How could he let his opponent go so easily? Lin Sun frowned and looked at the palace in the distance with a solemn look in his eyes. He didn't intend to kill Feng Luozi, but he was threatened by the supreme power of the Order of Tao the moment he used his power. It made his hair stand on end. He realized that he would be killed the next moment if he dared to make a move. Xian Jiuyin did not care about that. He walked up and gave Lin Sun a warm hug. "Brother Lin, I knew you would come. We have a chance to fight side by side again." He was beaming with joy. Ling Kezi beamed from the side as well, and he said, "Brother Xian is right. I won't have to live in fear anymore." "Useless." Lin Sun smiled and knocked on Ling Kezi's head. "Young master." In the distance, a slender and beautiful figure walked over. She wore clothes that were whiter than snow, and she possessed immortal flesh and divine bones. She was extraordinarily beautiful, and she was like a fairy that had walked out from a painting. It was Jintian Xianhua. Her beautiful eyes were filled with uncontrollable surprise and excitement. "Miss Xianyu, come here quickly," Xian Jiuyin said with a smile. Lin Sun also smiled. "We finally meet again after parting ways in the ancient immortal Forbidden Zone." An old friend who had not seen each other for a long time was naturally overjoyed. However, an ear-piercing voice suddenly resounded. "Jintian Xianhua, if you go with Lin Sun, your Jintian clan will be dragged into this mess. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should at least think for the clan behind you. Don't forget that Lin Sun is someone Shi Tiandi has ordered to be killed." It was a yellow-clothed woman from the Universe Tao Court that spoke these words. She had a beautiful appearance that surpassed all the beauties in the world, but her expression revealed a proud and aloof expression. Lin Sun frowned but didn't say anything. He just gazed at Jintian Xianhua and said, "Even though what this bitch said is slightly unpleasant, she's right. Xianhua, it's very likely that you'll be dragged into this mess if you go with me." The yellow-clothed woman's face turned gloomy when she was called a bitch, but she could only endure it in the end, because she didn't dare act rashly when facing Lin Sun. In these past few years, countless disciples of the Universe Tao Court have been killed by Lin Sun, and even Huangfu Xiaonong had been killed by him. So, how could a yellow-clothed woman have the courage to go against Lin Sun? Jintian Xianhua took a deep breath and revealed a slight smile. "I was expelled from my clan when I came to Rebirth of Freedom. In the future, my surname isn't Jintian anymore." Lin Sun took a deep glance at Jintian Xianhua, and then he nodded and didn't speak any further. "Miss Xianhua, if you're worried about being targeted by Shi Tiandi, why don't you come to our Xian clan? I guarantee that you won't be harmed in the slightest," Xian Jiuyin said with a smile. Suddenly, he slapped his forehead as he recalled something and sent a voice transmission to Lin Sun. "My old man said that after Rebirth of Freedom ends, I want you to come to my clan." "What's the matter?" Lin Sun was stunned. "Won't you know when you get there?" Actually, Xian Jiuyin himself didn't know. Lin Sun agreed. As they spoke, he suddenly noticed that the cultivators in the nearby area had instinctively moved far away from the area he resided in. They were avoiding snakes and scorpions, and they were avoiding the god of plague. At the same time, Lin Sun noticed numerous gazes that carried hatred as they stared at him. There were members of the Chaos, Panwu, Universe, and various other Tao courts, and there were also members of the 10 war clans and primeval imperial clans. Lin Sun wasn't surprised. To put it bluntly, if this place wasn't too mysterious and unknown, and if it wasn't for the existence of the Order of the Great Tao that could threaten him, he would absolutely have taken the initiative to look for trouble. Those enemies wished for nothing more than to kill him. So how could he not want to annihilate them as well? After all, they were all old acquaintances, and there were no martial emperors present here. So, with his current combat strength, he was absolutely capable of doing as he pleased. Bang! A wave of rumbling suddenly resounded in the distance. At this moment, the door to the divine palace that stood towering in the heavens and the earth and bathed in the order of the laws had opened slowly, and it instantly drew the gazes of everyone present here. Whem! A rain of light flowed while the laws interweaved together. An illusory figure floated up into appearance before the door to the divine palace, and it was completely formed from the order of the great Tao and revealed a supreme, imposing aura. The surroundings were stirred. The hearts of countless people burned while their gazes burned with desire. Is a competition that belongs to rebirth of freedom finally about to begin? The breathing of some people became heavy. The path of rebirth starts now. All of you will enter a cycle of reincarnation upon entering this palace, and those who were able to emerge from this cycle of reincarnation will obtain a chance at rebirth. The figure formed from the order of the Grand Tao didn't speak, but a voice resounded in the minds of everyone present here, and it allowed them to understand what they were about to face next. The cycle of reincarnation begins at the true martial realm. All of your souls, bodies, mental states, and attainments will transform into ordinary people after you fall into the cycle of reincarnation, and you'll have to cultivate once more. The true martial realm is your limit. The cultivators and the surroundings instantly exploded into an uproar. All of them revealed astounded expressions and were taken by surprise. The true martial realm was the first realm of cultivation, and it was the first realm of the 5 lower realms. Presently, cultivators at the true martial realm were simply existences that were no different than ordinary ants in their eyes, and they didn't take them seriously at all. Yet now, they were about to enter the cycle of reincarnation and transform into ordinary people. Only by breaking through and stepping foot into the true martial realm would they be able to emerge from it. The most terrifying part was that after they entered the cycle of reincarnation, all their current attainments would vanish, and they would be unable to provide any help to them. For a time, all of them were surprised and bewildered. No one had imagined that such an inconceivable test of reincarnation would be waiting for them right after they entered the rebirth of freedom. The figure formed by the Order of the Great Way seemed to be completely unaware of it, and its voice continued. In the cycle of reincarnation in the true martial realm, all of you will appear in the same world with another identity. If you want to emerge from it, you must leave behind your own will of the Great Way in the true martial world. Another identity, the true martial world. Leave behind the will of the Great Way. In an instant, many people acutely grasped some key points. If I have another identity, doesn't that mean I'm not me anymore? That's terrible. What if I become a beggar on the street after I enter the cycle of reincarnation? At that time, we won't be able to recognize each other as fellow disciples of the same sect. Someone wailed, the true martial world. In this way, the strongest cultivator in the world of reincarnation is only at the true martial realm. Someone's eyes lit up. If so, there is nothing to be afraid of. Since it's a test, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to leave one's will in the true martial world. Someone frowned and pondered. At this time, Lin Sun recalled the words that second senior brother Zhong Qiu had specially exhorted. Remember, if you encounter the cycle of reincarnation, awakening is the most important thing. At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly realized that the most dangerous part of this test was probably the word awakening. The master of Mind Mountain once said, once you are lost in the cycle of reincarnation, you will not be able to control your life or death, no matter how powerful you are. Now, after entering the cycle of reincarnation, all of them would appear in another identity, which meant that if they didn't awaken their consciousness before reincarnation, they would probably be lost in it for the rest of their lives. Lin Sun once experienced the cycle of reincarnation for more than 20 years in the 8th level of Green Cloud Path in the Heaven Accessing Place. At that time, he also appeared in another identity. Finally, he realized the essence of the Great Way is the truth and got out of it. It was no exaggeration to say that if he hadn't awakened his consciousness at that time, it would have been impossible for him to pass that level. Thinking of this, Lin Sun told everything he knew to Xian Jiuyin, Ling Kezi, and Jin Tian Xianhua. After listening to Lin Sun's words, The three of them couldn't help feeling awestruck and secretly remembered it. The voice of the illusory figure of order sounded again. The cycle of reincarnation in the world of true martial arts only lasts for 10 years. Once you are in it, once you die, it means real death. After 10 years, if you still can't get out of it, you will be lost in it for the rest of your life, with no chance of transcendence. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the field became dead silent. The air was so heavy that people couldn't breathe. Many people's faces changed at this time, and their hearts became heavy. It was certain that this was the great danger of the nirvana of freedom. Lin Sun's heart was in turmoil, and his expression was uncertain. 10 years, life and death, transcendence and being lost. The danger contained in it was absolutely beyond imagination. Now, can we still not participate? Someone spoke in a trembling voice, and at this moment, he wanted to withdraw. Chapter 22:39. Everyone realized that they were entering the Nirvana realm. The Queen of Freedom had entered the Nirvana realm. The path had already begun, and there was no turning back. Lin Sun transmitted his voice to Xian Jiuyin and the others. I'll try my best to find you after entering the samsara. At the same time, the experts who belonged to different camps were also discussing countermeasures. But no matter how they discussed, they were not sure. The reason was that no one knew what kind of place the world of true force in the samsara was, and what identity each of them would have after entering it. For a moment, the atmosphere was heavy and solemn. The samsara begins. As the figure of order spoke, a terrifying force suddenly emerged between heaven and earth, enveloping all the figures present. In the next moment, all of them were carried into the depths of the extremely grand and mysterious palace. Buzz! Before Lin Sun's vision recovered, a strange power of samsara of time emerged, making him drift in the torrent of time like duckweed. The colorful, twisted, and flickering time turned into waves, rolling endlessly. Gradually, Lin Sun's consciousness began to blur. He faintly felt a wave of scorching heat on his chest, and a wisp of mysterious energy seemed to have been awakened within his quintessent spirit vein that was deathly still and motionless. But when he tried to feel it carefully, his consciousness fell into complete darkness. Nirvana realm. In the sky of freedom, under the starry sky, a few figures of martial monarchs appeared on a vast barren land. Each of them looked surprised, ready to fight, and emitted a monstrous aura. They came from different worlds in the starry sky, and most of them were above the first level of Emperor Realm, but below the 6th level. What is this place? Many of them released their spiritual awareness to look around. I can feel that this world is covered with the power of order of the starry sky ancient path, which is completely different from the forbidden power of order. Some old antiques' eyes were shining. I've tried. This wilderness is sealed by the terrible power of order, and we can't break it with our strength. Some looked solemn. Doesn't this mean that this expanse of the heavens and the earth is like a cage that has trapped us here? Some looked gloomy. The atmosphere became oppressive. Suddenly, a continuous great wall appeared in the starry sky above them, and it seemed like an iron chain that blocked the starry sky. The great wall was incomparably lofty, and there was a castle built at regular intervals. The walls were mottled with bloodstains, and they were suffused with an ancient aura. In front of the great wall that stretched across the sky, the stars seemed small and insignificant, like a group of fireflies dancing in the sky. It wasn't that the planet was too small, but that the great wall was too big. Don't tell me this is ancient desolate regions Imperial Pass Great Wall. An old monster cried out in shock. Rumor had it that the ancient Desolation Realm, the origin of all Daos, had a great wall that spanned across many worlds. It was known as the first natural moat of the ancient Desolation Realm, the place where the Emperor Realm stopped. It was rumored that the 10 great Dao battles of the Archaic Era erupted precisely outside Imperial Pass Chong City. Impossible! This is Nirvana? Freedom Heaven is formed from the starry sky world's source order power. How could ancient desolate regions, Imperial Pass Great Wall appear here? Someone immediately denied it. Regardless of which emperor it was, when they looked at the towering, endless great wall that stretched across the starry sky, they all felt their hearts churn. The Great Wall was mottled with bloodstains, ancient and ancient. The walls were also full of battle scars. There were enormous palm prints that were as large as mountains, sword scars that extended for tens of thousands of jam, marks left by great bells, scorch marks left by divine flames. It was a ghastly sight. Nirvana? Starting from this moment, a voice rang out. Beneath the great wall of the starry sky, the power of order gathered and transformed into an illusory figure. The emperors present were shocked, and their eyes all looked over. It was finally here. They could naturally tell that the illusory figure was formed from the order power of this world and not a true spiritual body. From now on, everyone will enter the Great Wall of 10,000 Paths and defend one of the castles. When the time comes, you will face the attacks of strange beasts from the depths of the starry sky and the invasion of extraterrestrial demons. What you must do is to defend the castle, defend the Great Wall. The time limit is 10 years. In the Great Wall, you all have the chance to break through and transform the Nirvana, but at the same time, if you fall, it will mean your death. The voice of the figure formed from the power of order stunned all the great emperors present. Even though they had already learned that in this Nirvana mountain, there was the sky of freedom was filled with great danger, and there was a high chance that they would be targeted by the galactic beasts and extraterrestrial demons. But he didn't expect that such a dangerous test would come as soon as he arrived. For a moment, their expressions were uncertain. Many of them were so angry that they almost cursed out loud. Was this the Nirvana path? It felt like they were being sent to the front line to die. I've dominated the galaxy. When have I ever been treated like this? This Nirvana? I'm not going anymore. Someone shouted loudly, overbearing, shifting into the distance. Boom! A divine chain of order descended from the sky and bound the old monster, who was a 6th-level emperor, in an instant. The voice of the order figure sounded emotionless. From the moment you entered this world, the Nirvana has begun. There is no turning back. At this moment, all the emperors here understood that no matter if they were willing or not, they were unable to escape this test. World of True Martial. Longyuan City, Great Qian Dynasty. Su Clan. Early in the morning, Su Qinghan pushed the door open and walked out of his room. He stood in his own courtyard and stared at the sky in a daze. The courtyard was quiet and lush with grass and trees. In the corner of the courtyard, the Su family's 3rd young master's favorite Zhongnan green bamboo was planted. The green bamboo forest swayed in the morning breeze, making rustling sounds. No one knew that there was a new soul in Su clan's body when he woke up this morning. This is the world of true martial. After a long time, Lin Sun exhaled a long breath, and his eyes gradually became clear. From the moment he entered the samsara and came to the world of true martial, his consciousness had been awakened. This surprised him, because according to the analysis of his 2nd senior brother, the most difficult step in the samsara was awakening. It was very likely that he would be lost in the world of samsara forever without being able to awaken. But obviously, this most difficult step didn't baffle Lin Sun at all. Is it because I've experienced reincarnation a long time ago, and I've comprehended the profundities of the Grand Tao is the truth from the illusory and real? Lin Sun thought about it, and thought that all this was related to the samsara he had experienced when he entered the heaven-accessing place. Only after experiencing it could he awaken so quickly. 3rd young master, you get up early today. A pretty and lively young girl with her hair combed into 2 buns walked into the courtyard with a copper basin, towel, and toothbrush. Put it there. I'll do it myself, Lin Sun said casually. This young girl was Su Qinghan's personal maidservant named Qingzhu. She grew up with Su Qinghan. Nominally, they were master and servant, but in fact, they were no different from blood sisters. At this time, when Lin Sun occupied Su Qinghan's body, he also inherited Su Qinghan's memory. When facing Qingzhu, he didn't show any uneasiness. Okay, then I'll prepare breakfast first. Qingzhu turned around and left with a smile. As Lin Sun washed up, he began to carefully comb through Su Qinghan's memory. In this world called the true martial world, it was controlled by three dynasties, namely the Great Qian dynasty, the Great Chu dynasty, and the Great Wei dynasty. In the territory of each dynasty, there were various clans that cultivated martial arts. According to the difference in strength, these clans were also divided into big and small clans. The Su clan was one of the clans in the Great Qian dynasty in Dragon Lake City, and its power could barely be regarded as second-rate. In Dragon Lake City, there were as many as 7 or 8 clans like the Su clan. And in Dragon Lake City, there were only 2 clans that could be ranked as first-rate. Lin Sun wasn't interested in the layout of these forces at all, so he just glanced at them. What really interested Lin Sun was that Su Qinghan, as the third son of the patriarch of the Su clan, was already 14 years old, but hadn't embarked on the path of martial arts cultivation. Lin Sun quickly understood. In the true martial world, the true martial realm was already the apex of martial arts. 90% of the people in this world were ordinary people, and only a few could embark on the path of martial arts cultivation. For example, the Su clan was already a second-rate force in the martial arts clans. There were hundreds of clansmen, but only a few dozen of them really embarked on the path of cultivation. Unfortunately, because of her weak body since childhood and the lack of qi and blood, although Su Qinghan had tried many times, she had never succeeded in crossing the threshold of cultivation. Lin Sun noticed that the Su clan didn't lack cultivation methods, and in Su Qinghan's memory, there were 7 or 8 breathing guidance methods for practicing qi and meditating. What surprised Lin Sun the most was that these cultivation methods weren't coarse at all. On the Starry Sky ancient path, they could also be regarded as the best basic cultivation methods. This also meant that the reason why Su Qinghan couldn't cultivate was not because of the cultivation method. Moreover, since childhood, Su Qinghan had swallowed a lot of spiritual herbs. Of course, those so-called spiritual herbs were only the most basic spiritual herbs for Lin Sun. But for a person who couldn't cultivate, these spiritual herbs could be regarded as precious. Over the years, the spiritual herbs used on Su Qinghan alone had accounted for 30% of the spiritual herbs purchased by the Su clan every year. It could be seen that Su Qinghan didn't lack spiritual herbs to cultivate. In a word, Su Qinghan, who couldn't cultivate, was just like an ordinary person, although he was the third young master of the Su clan. He didn't have the right to participate in the clan's affairs. Fortunately, perhaps because Su Qinghan couldn't cultivate, his father, mother, and 2 elder brothers all loved and took care of him, so that he could live a peaceful life without worrying about food and clothing. Su Qinghan occasionally felt sad, because he felt that he couldn't cultivate and couldn't help his parents and brothers, which made him feel very sad. After all, a young man was unwilling to be mediocre. P.S. First 4 chapters in a row. Before 6 o'clock in the evening, there's more. Kids, throw your monthly votes to support the goldfish, and go all out today. Chapter 2240. After serving the third young master for breakfast, Qingzhu hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "Last night, the news came that the first young master was defeated." Lin Sun, who was disguised as Su Qinghan, was stunned, and some memories came to his mind. Every 10 years, the 3 dynasties of the world of true martial arts would jointly hold a true martial competition. The top 10 could get God-given power. The one who ranked first could even enter the mountain of true martial arts to cultivate. Every young man under the age of 18 who embarked on the road of martial arts was eligible to participate in the assessment of true martial arts competition. After layers of screening, the 3 dynasties, Great Qian, Great Chu, and Great Wei, would each select 10 seeded players to compete for the final top 10. Not long ago, the true martial arts competition in the territory of the Great Qian dynasty had begun. As a second-rate family in Longyuan City, the Su family only had one place to participate in the true martial arts competition. Su Qingqiu, the first young master of the Su family, won the place without any dispute. In Longyuan City, Su Qingqiu was an outstanding figure of the younger generation. At the age of 16, He had reached the 7th level of martial realm, small circulation realm. Su Qingqiu, one of the 4 outstanding talents of Lonyuan City, was regarded as the future banner-bearer of the Su family. It could be said that he was young and high-spirited. In Su Qinghan's memory, he also admired Su Qinghan very much. But now, Qingzhu said that Su Qingqiu was defeated. Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "Qingzhu, help me collect some information about the true martial arts competition." Qingzhu was taken aback. She found it a little strange. In the past, the 3rd young master had never cared about such things because he couldn't cultivate. Was it because of the 1st young master's defeat this time? Qingzhu didn't think too much and agreed. After Qingzhu left, Lin Sun was lost in thought. Is the God-given power that the top 10 of the true martial arts competition can get related to the power of order in the world of true martial arts? If one wanted to get out of the samsara of the world of true martial arts, he had to leave his own will of the great way in the world of true martial arts. Lin Sun suspected that if he wanted to do this, he might start from the true martial arts competition. Should I say that you are lucky or lucky? Since I've temporarily borrowed your body, I'll return you a good fortune. Lin Sun said to himself. The reason why Su Qinghan couldn't cultivate was because some of her meridians were blocked, so she couldn't sense the flow of energy that came from her breathing. In the true martial world, if one's meridians were blocked, it meant that they were doomed to never cultivate again. After all, the highest cultivation realm in this world was only the true martial realm, and their knowledge of the Grand Tao was extremely limited. However, in the eyes of a peak consummation quasi-emperor like Lin Sun, blocked meridians were not a problem at all. Thinking of this, Lin suddenly realized a problem. After entering the world of samsara, not only did his consciousness awaken at the first possible moment, even the memories, inheritances, and wisdom in his mind were completely intact. But according to that nirvana, according to the order of the heaven of Mahesvara, every powerful being who entered the cycle of reincarnation, their soul, physique, state of mind, cultivation, everything they had before would be reduced to mere mortals after entering the cycle of reincarnation. If he wanted to cultivate, he would have to start from scratch in the true martial world. Even if he awakened his consciousness, the comprehension of the great Tao, the inheritance, and the memories that he had learned in the past would not appear again. It was no different from being reborn. But at this moment, Lin Sun sensed that his previous comprehension of the great Tao, the power of inheritance, and the memories that he had mastered were all intact. This was undoubtedly very abnormal. For a moment, Lin Sun could not help but be stunned. After pondering for a long time, he suddenly recalled that when he experienced the energy of samsara and entered the true martial world, the quintessence veins within his body had awakened from their slumber, and it had undergone a shocking change. Unfortunately, his consciousness had fallen into the darkness at that time, and he did not have time to experience that change. But at this time, Lin Sun suddenly realized that the abnormal situation in his body was very likely to be related to the change of the original spiritual vein. The original spiritual vein was Lin Sun's talent, which enabled him to control the supernatural power of forbidden passing. He still clearly remembered that when he entered the dark world and passed through the vortex channel formed by the law of time, his original spiritual vein had undergone a change and devoured a wisp of the law of time. And the true martial world was originally formed by the order of samsara of time, and the essence of the power of time was the mystery of time. In this case, the reason why I could awaken my consciousness at the first time and master all the memories before the samsara is related to my talent. Thinking of this, Lin Sun could not help but be surprised. The devouring abyss. What did this talent mean on Earth? What level of talent would it be if it was on the other side of the starry sky? After a while, Lin Sun calmed down and decided to start practicing. But soon, he showed a bitter smile. It was not good to master too many inheritances, so he did not know how to make a decision for a while. Taishin Sword Sutra, Sky Punishing Sword Sutra, Infinite Devouring Sutra, Great Silence Sutra, Green Lotus Cave Sutra, Nine Cauldrons World Suppression Sutra, Great Way Yellow Quartz Sutra, Great Quietus Thunder Sutra, there were dozens of Taoist scriptures. Each of them was enough to shock the ancient and modern times and could be regarded as supreme scriptures. So Lin Sun did not know how to start for a while. I see. Suddenly, Lin Sun realized a possibility with a flash of inspiration. The samsara of true martial was nirvana. The beginning of the road of nirvana was to become immortal again and walk on the road of Tao, just like starting to practice for the first time in his life. If it was in the past, he could easily set foot on the road of cultivation by practicing any cultivation method. But the nirvana of the samsara of true martial, was the road of nirvana really so simple? Whether it is the samsara or not, I will take it as a new beginning. Since I'm going to start a new practice, I should practice the great wave furnace scripture created by me. At this moment, Lin Sun completely understood. The distractions in his mind were swept away, and his mind became clear. Before the samsara, he was already at the peak of the great completion of the quasi-emperor realm. He embarked on an unprecedented road, which could be said to be the only one in the past, present, and future. Before the samsara, he walked out of the mind prison and rose to the lower world as a young man. In the following years, he became famous in the ancient desolation realm and fought on the ancient road of the starry sky. He was accustomed to life and death, experienced endless wind and rain and bloody tempering, saw the vastness of the universe, distinguished the vastness of the world, comprehended the Tao on the way, and mastered all kinds of supreme scriptures. He came, walked, and saw. Before the samsara, he was already at the highest realm under the emperor realm, and his cultivation was at the great completion. But did he really have no regrets in his previous practice? Yes. For example, when he first set foot on the road of cultivation at a young age, his body was weak, and he only practiced the method taught by Master Lu, which was not profound but the most suitable for him. On the other hand, he truly stepped onto the path of the absolute Tao in the absolute domain, and it was when he'd attained the absolute king realm. In the lower 5 realms, he had never touched the threshold of the great path, which was a regret in itself, and it could not be changed at all. Everything was in the past. How could he change it? But now, he came to the nirvana realm. Entering the samsara of time in the freedom heaven gave Lin Sun the opportunity to practice again to eliminate these defects and regrets. This was the real nirvana realm, rebirth. It was also at this time that Lin Sun understood the nirvana realm. The sky of freedom was an unprecedented, fortuitous encounter, and it was truly an incredible one. Perhaps it was comparable to the nirvana realm that changed one's fate. The nirvana realm was the road to the immortal supreme. Understanding this, Lin Sun's mind was clear and unprecedentedly firm and calm. He would never miss this opportunity. Time went by day. The atmosphere in the Su family became depressed because Su Qingqiu, the eldest young master of the Su family, was defeated and had no chance to participate in the true martial competition. It was said that Su Qingqiu became a different person after returning to the clan. He was silent and depressed, and his figure was getting thinner and thinner. The Su family felt sad. Su Qingqiu was the pride of the clan, but now he suffered such a setback, which was really a big blow. It was said that the head of the Su family was also worried about this. He didn't blame Su Qingqiu for his failure, but felt sorry for his son who had never come out of the shadow of defeat. If it went on like this, Su Qingqiu would be disabled. Lin Sun stayed in the courtyard all the time and never went out. But through talking with Qingzhu, he also learned a lot about the true martial competition. Second young master has gone to participate in the true martial competition. One morning, during breakfast, Qingzhu said happily, "No one expected that the second young master, who has been in seclusion in the clan, has already broken through to the great heavenly cycle realm. He's even stronger than the eldest young master." Lin Sun nodded with a smile. Second brother is really powerful. Su Qingfeng, the second young master of the Su family, was an introverted and handsome 14-year-old boy. He was a man of few words since he was a child, but he was also very good to Su Qinghan, his third brother. He often came to visit Su Qinghan and didn't talk much. He just accompanied Su Qinghan to eat and read books. Su Qinghan might not understand, but how could Lin Sun not see that the introverted Su Qingfeng was actually more talented and profound than their eldest brother Su Qingqiu? On this day, Su Qingfeng set off to participate in the true martial competition. A group of clansmen saw him off in person. Lin Sun also went. Su Qingfeng was handsome, and as delicate as jade. There was a restrained self-confidence between his brows as he rode away on his white horse. Lin Sun also saw his eldest brother Su Qingqiu. His originally imposing figure turned out to be thin and bony. His face was also very pale, and his cheeks were sunken. He looked very haggard, but at this time, he smiled very happily. He patted Lin Sun on the shoulder and said, "Third brother, God bless our Su family. With second brother going to the battle, you will definitely perform better than me. Let's go. I will take you to the Mist Tower for a drink. Haven't you always been curious about the brothel? I will take you there to broaden your horizons." He put his arm around Lin Sun's shoulder intimately and walked out. Lin Sun's lips twitched. How could an elder brother take his younger brother to a brothel? However, he didn't refuse. It was just a drink, not a brothel. Chapter 2241. 1 month later, Lin Sun reorganized and tempered his meridians and acupoints with a secret method until he was sure that there were no defects inside and outside his body. Then he decided to start practicing. The martial realm was divided into 9 levels. They were qi guiding, inner strengthening, mansion opening, orifices clearing, marrow washing, blood burning, small circulation, big circulation, and spirit changing. Each level would cause the power of the Xiuzhe to change. In short, the martial realm was the first threshold on the road of Tao, and the first step for a practitioner to lay the foundation of Tao. A tree that could be embraced was born at the end of a hair. The 9-story platform was built from the earth. If Lin Sun wanted to, he could reach the mastery of the martial realm within a month. But there was only one chance for nirvana. In order to make up for the regret of the previous Tao, Lin Sun wouldn't pursue the speed of practice. 2 months later, Lin Sun sat cross-legged. When he breathed in and out, his qi was surging like wind and thunder. The operation of qi was like a fire, and his body was boiling like a furnace. Between his nostrils, streams of air like pythons swallowed, which was the embodiment of his qi reaching the extreme. Whoosh, when Lin Sun woke up from meditation, he breathed out gently. The qi shot out like a sharp arrow, tearing the air. Using the body as a furnace, drawing qi into the body, qi will be smooth, like burning and boiling, and you can reach the peak. Lin Sun comprehended silently. It took him a whole month to reach qi guiding, the first level of the martial realm. Setting foot on the peak is just the first step. If I want to prove the unprecedented Tao, I must have an unprecedented foundation that is invincible in the same realm. Lin Sun didn't rush to break through. The martial realm seemed to be the most basic first level, but now Lin Sun almost exhausted all his efforts and means in the face of this realm. His Great Way furnace scripture, which could contain thousands of Tao and develop thousands of methods to temper the foundation of Tao, was naturally the most suitable cultivation method for him. Besides that, the various supreme inheritances within his mind allowed him to obtain a great deal of reference when he started cultivating once more. A few tens of supreme inheritances were like a few tens of supreme figures guiding him in his cultivation, and this allowed him to establish a foundation that could shock the world when he stepped foot into the true martial realm once more. At dinner, Qingzhu would look at Lin with her watery eyes from time to time. She couldn't help but say when she cleaned up the dishes, "Third child, you grow up really fast." Currently, Su Qinghan was only 14 years old. She was still growing up. However, Qingzhu had never imagined that in just 2 months of time, this third young master would suddenly grow a great deal taller. His immature brows had stretched out, his gaze was clear and bright like the stars, and his entire body emanated a copious amount of vitality. Lin Sun smiled and didn't explain. Instead, he said, "Qingzhu, pack up. Starting tomorrow, I'll go to the manor on Mount Hanin outside the city to live for a while." "All right," Qing Zhu agreed. In the Su family, although the third young master couldn't cultivate, he was the most favored. As long as his requests weren't too excessive, no one could refuse. 3 months later, in front of a waterfall in a canyon on Mount Hanin, the waterfall poured down like a dragon. A figure suddenly swept out from under the waterfall and landed on a rock. The slender and tall figure was bathed in the misty sunshine, glowing with a mysterious luster. This person was Su Qinghan, who was disguised by Lin Sun. It had been 3 months since he had decided to cultivate. He finally reached the peak of Qi Guiding, the first level of martial realm. Next, there's no need to go through so much trouble. A satisfied smile appeared on Lin Sun's face. In 3 months, he had almost exhausted all means to make the first step of the cultivation of Tao reach an unprecedented level. It was said that everything was difficult at the beginning. After stepping through this threshold, everything would come naturally, and he didn't have to spend so much effort on cultivation. "Third young master, it's time to eat." The crisp and lively voice of Qing Zhu sounded in the distance. Lin Sun picked up his clothes, turned around, and left this secret cultivation place that belonged to him alone. After the meal, Qing Zhu brought the latest news. Second young master Su Qingfeng had successfully passed the 3rd round of screening in Martial Realm and now went to the capital of the Great Qian Dynasty. What was waiting for him would be the 4th round of screening. As long as he passed, he could enter the final selection of the Great Chu Dynasty. The space between Qing Zhu's brows was suffused with an expression of pride. Second young master really lives up to expectations. Second young master's name is being spread everywhere in Dragon Lake City now, and many clans have taken the initiative to pay a visit to our Su clan with the intention of forming a marriage alliance with our Su clan. Lin Sun listened with a smile while eating. In the years before he was reincarnated, he had never enjoyed such a peaceful and fulfilling life. However, this kind of peaceful and cozy life was soon broken. On this day, as soon as Lin Sun returned from the cultivation place, he saw Qing Zhu running from afar in panic with a pale face. "Third young master, it's bad." "Second young master. Second young master's cultivation has been destroyed." Qing Zhu's voice was in tears. Her beautiful face was pale, and her watery eyes were full of tears. Lin Sun recalled the scene when Su Qingfeng left his family and went to participate in Martial Realm. The young man was handsome and handsome. He rode away on a white horse, looking so natural and unrestrained. But now, how could his cultivation be destroyed? "Don't panic. Let's go and have a look together." Lin Sun stepped forward and patted Qing Zhu on the shoulder. That day, he left Mount Hanshan on a red date horse. Su clan. The atmosphere was gloomy. Su Yanhai and other big shots gathered in the hall. In the center of the hall, there was a stretcher. Su Qingfeng was lying on it with a pale face. He had fallen into a coma and hadn't woken up yet. The atmosphere was oppressive. Everyone was angry. An old doctor, after carefully examining Su Qingfeng's condition, couldn't help sighing and shaking his head. His tendons and veins are broken and his viscera are seriously injured. It's not easy to keep his life. As for cultivation, before he finished his words, everyone knew that Su Qingfeng would be a useless man for the rest of his life. All of a sudden, Su Yunhai's eyes turned red and his lips trembled. After a long time, he took a deep breath and said, "Even if Qingfeng is a useless man, he is still my son. As long as I'm alive, I won't let him suffer any more grievances." The others were also furious. "Father, I'm going to avenge my second brother." Su Qingqiu stood up with a livid face and bloodshot eyes. He was as ferocious as a raging beast. "Don't you think it's messy enough?" Su Yunhai scolded. "You are not allowed to go out from now on without my permission." His second son had been destroyed. How could he watch his eldest son avenge his son? If something bad happened to him, who would be able to carry the Su clan in the future? A rush of footsteps sounded. Then, Lin Sun walked into the hall. He glanced at everyone, and then at Su Qingfeng, who was lying on the stretcher in a coma. He roughly understood what had happened. Many people were stunned when they saw Lin Sun. They hadn't seen Su Qinghan for a long time, but the third young master, Su Qinghan, seemed to have changed into a different person. Not only had he grown taller, but his every move was calm and composed. Qinghan, why are you here? Su Yanhai frowned. He usually wouldn't let Su Qinghan get involved in such a big clan event. I'm here to see my second brother. Lin Sun squatted on the ground and carefully checked Su Qingfeng's condition. He couldn't help but recall some scenes of his childhood. Whenever his second brother had time, he would kind of play with him. He was a man of few words and only accompanied him to eat and read. Occasionally, he would bring a lot of delicious snacks and pastries. These were all Su Qinghan's memories. In these memories, she also had feelings for her second brother. It was a kind of brotherly love where blood was thicker than water. In the Su clan, Su Qinghan admired her eldest brother, Su Qingqiu, the most, but she was closest to her second brother, Su Qingfeng. An unspeakable anger surged in Lin Sun's heart. He knew that it came from Su Qinghan. He said in his heart, "Don't worry. I'll take revenge. With me around, your second brother won't become a useless man." Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun stood up and asked, "Who can tell me who did this?" A calm voice sounded in the depressing hall. Looking at Su Qinghan's expression, there was a kind of majesty that no one dared to take lightly. The crowd was stunned again, as if they had seen Su Qinghan again. "Third brother, we're all as angry as you are, but it's not the time to lose your temper." Su Qingqiu stepped forward and said gently, "I won't lose my temper." Lin Sun shook his head and turned to walk out of the hall. He suddenly realized that Su Qinghan had always been a person who couldn't cultivate in the clan. Moreover, he was just a teenager. Although he lived a carefree life, he didn't have much say in this kind of thing. In this way, even if he were to explain, it would be very strenuous. "Third brother, where are you going?" Su Qingqiu asked hurriedly. "To do what I should do." Lin Sun didn't look back. It was indeed time to leave. The martial arts competition between the three dynasties was about to start in 3 months. If he didn't win the qualification to participate in the competition, he was bound to miss the opportunity. "You're not going to avenge your second brother, are you?" Su Qingqiu's face changed. "Why not?" As Lin Sun spoke, he had already walked out of the hall, and his figure was about to disappear. What he said instead caused everyone in the audience hall to be stunned. In the entire Dragon Lake City, who didn't know that their Su clan's third young master was unable to cultivate. But now he was going to avenge Su Qingfeng. Had he gone mad from anger? "Third brother, it's not the time for you to make trouble. Come back." Su Qingqiu chased after him. At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly turned around, stared at Su Qingqiu, and said seriously, "Big brother, you can't stop me. After I leave, please take care of my parents. Don't worry, I'll be back in half a year at most." Su Qingqiu was stunned. For the first time in his life, he heard his third brother talk to him in such a tone. He wasn't irritated, but he suddenly felt that his third brother, he seemed to have changed into a different person. P.S. Goldfish eat first. Although it's tiring, since it's an outbreak, it must be done to the end. There's more tonight. Chapter 2242. In the blink of an eye, Su Qingqiu had already lost sight of his third brother, Su Qinghan. "Qingqiu, what are you waiting for? Go after him." Su Yunhai's furious voice came from the hall. Su Qingqiu panicked and hurriedly chased out of the clan. But looking around, there was no sign of his third brother, Su Qinghan. On this day, the news that the second young master of the Su clan, Su Qingfeng, had participated in the true martial competition and his cultivation had been destroyed spread, causing a sensation in Dragon Lake City. 3 months ago, the dazzling young master of the Su clan, Su Qingqiu, who was regarded as the rising star of Dragon Lake City, was eliminated. 3 months later, the second young master of the Su clan was destroyed in the imperial city of Great Qian. It was said that the third young master of the Su clan, Su Qinghan, who had yet to embark on the path of cultivation, ran away from home, saying that he wanted to avenge his second brother, Su Qingfeng. This was undoubtedly ridiculous. The Su clan, for a time, became a laughingstock in the city and was regarded as having bad luck. On this day, the patriarch of the Su clan, Su Yanhai, fell ill from anxiety and anger. This cast a shadow over the entire Sioux clan. The first young master of the Sioux clan, Su Chin-cho, was ordered to temporarily take charge of all the affairs of the clan. Although there was no internal strife in the Sioux clan, all the major forces of Dragon Lake City knew that if they could not overcome this hurdle, the Sioux clan would most likely decline. Realizing this situation, those who had taken the initiative to ask for a marriage alliance with the Sioux clan all came to the Sioux clan and returned the betrothal gifts and marriage contracts. Some forces that had a good relationship with the Sioux clan also drew a line in their relations, for fear of being tainted by the Sioux clan's bad luck. It was easy to add flowers to a brocade, but difficult to provide help in a time of need. On this day, Su Chin-cho, who was temporarily in charge of the Sioux clan, felt unprecedented pressure, worry, and sorrow. Why had the Sioux clan fallen to such a state? This day was the 4th month since Lin Sun came to the true martial world. The Great Qin dynasty had a vast territory with many cities. If it was Lin Sun, who was at the consummation of quasi-emperor, he could circle around the Great Qin dynasty in a short period of time. But now, after spending 4 months of cultivation, he was only at the 5th level of the true martial realm, marrow cleansing. Not to mention teleportation, he could not even fly. Thus, when hurrying along, he could only ride a horse. Half a month later, Lin Sun finally arrived at the heart of the Great Qin dynasty after a long journey. The imperial capital. The prosperity of the imperial capital was enough to make any outsider feel shocked and even ashamed of their own inferiority. But in Lin's eyes, however, it was just a bustling city, far inferior to the forbidden city of Xiao Empire. After all, the strongest person in the world was only at the 9th level of martial realm. 90% of the people in the world were ordinary people who didn't know how to cultivate. In short, this was a mortal world. On the 2nd day after he entered the imperial capital, Lin Sun spent 30 taels of silver to get the information he wanted. In the 4th round of the true martial competition, the person who crippled Su Qingfeng's cultivation was the 7th prince of the Great Qin dynasty, Qian Yuanba. He was a character whose cultivation had reached the 8th tier of the true martial realm, the complete heavenly cycle realm. In the Great Qin dynasty, Qian Yuanba was ranked 5th among the top 10 geniuses. In the royal family of the Great Qin dynasty, Qian Yuanba's combat capability was also top-notch, stronger than some of the older generation. Thinking about it, it made sense. The speed at which young people rose was always faster than those of the older generation. The true martial realm was the apex of martial arts, which kept the lifespan of most practitioners in this world at more than 100 years old. Even those on the 9th level of martial realm could not live forever. If there were others who knew this news, they would not even have the idea of revenge in the face of such a horrible figure as Qian Yuanba. But for Lin Sun, he had killed countless emperors. How could he care about a guy in the true martial realm? On the 5th day in the imperial capital, Lin Sun broke through to the 6th level of martial realm, Burning Blood. It was also on this day that the 5th round of the true martial competition began. A total of 300 young talents selected from all over the Great Qin dynasty gathered in the imperial capital. In the early morning, a huge arena was set up in the imperial capital. 300 young men and women from all over the world were waiting not far from the arena. In the 5th round of selection, 30 people would be selected from the 300 of them. The competition was very cruel, which made every young man and woman look dignified, nervous, and expectant. Only Qian Yuanba was sitting on a throne by himself in the field, looking very lazy. He was dressed in a bright yellow robe with a feather crown on his head. His body was strong and powerful. When his eyes turned, there was a ray of light bursting out. Boring, really boring. Qian Yuanba let out a sigh with a contemptuous attitude. Other contestants nearby did not dare to speak or even look at Qian Yuanba. In the previous elections, all those who became the 7th Crown Prince's opponents had their cultivation crippled without exception. Even several unlucky guys were killed directly in the battle. This also made Heaven Yuanba the most fearsome and ruthless person in this true martial competition. His temperament was ruthless, and his methods were bloody. The time has come. The fifth round of selection begins now. A deep voice sounded in the imperial capital under the morning light, which made all the contestants feel refreshed. It should have started long ago. Qian Yuanba stretched, stood up from the throne, and glanced at the other contestants with a playful look, as if he was picking prey. Many people felt uncomfortable, and some were angry, feeling that their dignity had been violated, but no one dared to challenge him. Now let's start drawing lots. A middle-aged man in a luxurious robe walked over and announced in a deep voice, "I'll go first." Qian Yuanba took the responsibility and went forward to be the first to draw lots. But at this moment, an indifferent voice came from the gate of the imperial capital. "There's no need to draw lots. Your opponent is me." There was a group of guards guarding the gate of the imperial capital to maintain order, but at this moment, there was a commotion and the guards flew out in disorder. Following that, a tall and sturdy figure walked over. Everyone's eyes narrowed, and they could not help but be surprised. This was the imperial capital, the core area of the great Qin dynasty. Who dared to come and cause trouble? Come, take down this bastard who trespassed. The middle-aged man in a luxurious robe shouted with a gloomy face. Immediately, a group of fully equipped imperial city guards rushed out like a tide. "Wait!" Qian Yuanbao waved his hand to stop all of this, and then he shot his gaze towards the tall figure that walked over from afar and said with a ghastly expression, "Who are you? Why have I never seen you in the past?" "Dragon Lake City, Su Qinghan." The tall figure was exactly Lin's son. "Su Qingfeng is my second brother." As soon as these words were spoken, a wave of commotion arose in the surroundings. All the participants naturally knew who Su Qingfeng was, and they were even more clearly aware that Su Qingfeng's cultivation had been crippled by Qian Yuanba during the last round of the test. "Su Qingfeng?" Qian Yuanba thought for a moment before he said with an expression of sudden understanding, "So, it's that trash. So in this way, you've come to take revenge for that trash?" His voice revealed playfulness, disdain, and a trace of surprise, and he seemed to have never imagined that there would really be someone in this world that was unafraid of death. "Seventh Highness, this person has disturbed the order and has already disturbed the progress of the test. It's better to take him down as soon as possible," the middle-aged man reminded. "Don't." Qian Yunba waved his hand and revealed a trace of a savage smile. "Since this kid has the courage to come and take revenge, then I'll give him a chance to be reduced to trash." As he spoke, he charged out explosively and swung his fist. Bang! As the strong wind from his fist swung out, it actually faintly contained a trace of Tao insight, causing the might of his fist to rise explosively by a great deal. All the participants that saw this scene exclaimed with admiration in their hearts. This was Qian Yuanba, one of the 10 great outstanding talents of the Darqian dynasty. He was only 17 years old, yet he'd already grasped a trace of the profundities of Tao insight in the martial Tao. Lin's son stopped moving, and as he watched this fist approach, his expression was neither happy nor sad, and his figure didn't dodge. A trace of disdain and disappointment flashed within Qian Yuanba's eyes. Has he been scared silly? He's simply too weak. If I knew this would happen, I shouldn't have made a move myself. But right at this moment, he felt a sudden pain on his wrist as if it was fiercely clamped by an iron clamp, and he saw that Lin Sun's hand had already held onto his wrist since an unknown time. In the eyes of everyone, this fist of Qian Yuanba was unable to move forward an inch when it arrived 30 centimeters away from Lin Sun. For a time, the pupils of everyone constricted. "Is that all you've got?" Lin Sun spoke indifferently with a relaxed bearing, and his figure didn't move in the slightest. Looking at Qian Yuanba again, his face turned red. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get rid of Lin Sun's palm force. "Get out of here!" His muscles bulged, emitting a fierce and unparalleled power. He suddenly waved his left hand and smashed it towards Lin Sun. The fist force was like thunder, swift and overbearing. But halfway, his wrist was grasped by Lin Sun again, and he couldn't move forward. All of a sudden, Qian Yuanba's face changed completely. Bang! Lin Sun shook his hands and kicked out at the same time. The robust body of Qian Yuanba flew out fiercely and fell on the ground more than 30 meters away, falling on his face like a dog eating shit. There was a burst of gasps in the field. It felt like a dream. Qian Yuanba was one of the 10 great outstanding talents of the Darqian dynasty. But now he seemed extremely weak. Not convinced? Then come here. Lin Sun crooked his finger and looked at Qian Yuanba in the distance indifferently. I'll kill you. Qian Yuanba was completely angry, or he didn't believe that he would be defeated so quickly. Boom! His body was like a tiger coming out of the mountain, and he displayed a kind of fierce combat skill. His palms were glowing with bright golden luster, and his power was brave and fierce. Bang! Lin Sun kicked out. Qian Yuanba came fast and left even faster. He was directly kicked over several times in the air and then fell to the ground heavily. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen, and blood was spurting from his mouth. There was a dead silence in the field. Everyone was shocked. Su Qinghan was only a teenager. How could she have such a heaven-defying combat power? They didn't know that in Su Qinghan's body there was an unimaginable old monster who possessed the soul of the great perfection of Quasi-Emperor. In fact, Lin Sun was indeed an old monster in the face of these young men and women whose average age was more than 10 years old. Chapter 2243. Qian Yuanba was dumbfounded. He had realized the horror of his opponent, but he couldn't imagine when there was such a ruthless man in the great Qian dynasty. Su Qingfeng's younger brother? But why was Su Qingfeng so weak? What is your cultivation on earth? Qian Yuanba got up with a livid face. The 6th level of martial realm, the burning blood realm. Lin Sun said casually. There was no need to hide it at all. His words made everyone in the field completely confused. Was the 6th level of martial realm so fierce? Liar! Qian Yuanba was furious and felt extremely ashamed. How could a man at the 6th level of martial realm be so powerful? Lin Sun was humiliating him on purpose. I don't need to lie to deal with you. As he said, Lin Sun stepped forward. Now it's time for you to pay the price. Swish! He was so fast that he could cross more than 30 meters with one step. How dare you? On the way, the middle-aged man in a splendid robe rushed to Lin Sun, waving a black iron spear. Lin Sun clenched his hand into a fist and waved it casually. Clang! The spear buzzed violently, as if it had been hit by a landslide and a tsunami. The middle-aged man's arm was broken, and he staggered back with a horrified face. He was at the 9th level of martial realm, spirit transformation, but he couldn't even resist one move. How strong was Su Qinghan on earth? Before the middle-aged man could respond, a scream sounded. He looked up and saw Lin Sun stepping on Qian Yuanba to the ground. Lin Sun's tall and slender figure was covered with the morning light, just like a god. The nearby participants were both shocked and delighted. In the previous election examination, there were quite a few experts who had been crippled by Qian Yuanba. This man was the 7th prince of great Qian dynasty. He was domineering and cruel. He had already angered the public, but no one dared to challenge him. Now watching him being trampled on the ground like a dead dog, the bloody scene made people feel extremely comfortable. Qian Yuanba screamed in complete horror. What are you doing? Let me go! Let me go! Guards, come on, kill him! A group of armed guards rushed over with a murderous look. They were all strong men who had been on the battlefield for many years and climbed out of the dead. Just the killing intent emanating from his body was enough to make the contestants' hearts tremble. But Lin Sun seemed to be completely unaware, and he continued, a life for a life, a debt for a debt. I'm not afraid to tell you that in my eyes, your life is really worthless. But this time, I'll only cripple your cultivation. Bang! Lin Sun exerted strength on his tiptoes and shattered the meridians of Qian Yuanba. Qian Yuanba let out a shrill scream, rolled his eyes, and fainted directly. Everyone was stunned. In the imperial palace, under the watchful eyes of everyone, this young man had actually crippled the 7th prince's cultivation. This was enough to shake Dai Qian. Quickly kill him. The middle-aged man roared, his eyes red. If His Majesty knew that the seventh crown prince had been deposed, he, as the chief examiner, would have to pay a heavy price. Groups of imperial guards began to move out, and their weapons with cold light were pointed at Lin Sun. Lin Sun looked indifferent, and his eyes were as clear as a lake. Before the Samsara, he had fought all the way from Xiao Empire to the Starry Sky. Any scene he had experienced was thousands of times more dangerous than the current situation. How could he care about it? I'm not here to kill people. Of course, if you want to die, I won't be polite. Lin Sun opened his mouth. His calm and composed attitude was like a deterrent, making everyone who made eye contact with him feel a chill in their hearts. Go! The middle-aged man roared. The guards didn't hesitate to charge forward while terrifying killing intent covered the heavens and the earth as they surged forward. Are you really forcing me to wash this place with blood today? Lin Sun frowned slightly. At this moment, a sweet voice like the sound of nature sounded from afar. Wait, who allowed you to do it in the imperial palace? Before the voice died away, a beautiful girl in a lavender palace dress with black hair and a bun came to the field, riding a tall white deer. This was a girl of 15 or 16 years old, with eyes as clear as spring, skin as smooth as cream, and a snow-white neck. She was extremely beautiful. Your Highness, you don't know, the middle-aged man was about to explain, but the beautiful girl interrupted him with a frown. I saw what happened just now. There's no need to explain. Her voice was clear and crisp, but it was extremely dignified. And you, hurry up and leave. She pointed at those imperial guards. Those imperial guards were treated as if they had suffered a great loss. Previously, they were outnumbered, but facing Lin Sun alone, they still felt a chill in their hearts. This was an instinctive reaction when facing a threat. Your Highness, the cultivation of the seventh highness has been destroyed by this man. The middle-aged man's face was livid, and he didn't understand the beautiful girl's behavior. He deserves to be destroyed. He deserves it. The princess frowned, and her voice was cold. Her words made the middle-aged man speechless. Child, how about we write off the previous things? The princess looked at Lin Sun. Lin Sun thought for a while and nodded in agreement. The core purpose of his coming here was to avenge Su Qingfeng. Apart from that, he also wanted to participate in the true martial competition. If he could not make a big deal out of it, he would be happy to do so. A touch of appreciation appeared on the beautiful oval face of the princess, and she said in a clear voice, Child, are you willing to participate in the true martial competition? Of course, Lin Sun couldn't refuse. Then come with me. The princess waved her hand and revealed a smile. The beautiful girl's charm made the eyes of all the contestants present stare blankly. In the current Great Qian dynasty, people might not know who the Great Qian Emperor was, but it was absolutely impossible for them not to know the name of the third princess, Qian Yulio. She was born smart and talented, and she made rapid progress on the road of martial arts. She was only 16 years old, but she was already the leader of the top 10 heroes of the Great Qian dynasty. She was even crowned as the first person of the younger generation in the true martial realm. Some of the older generation could only lower their heads in shame in front of her. In the Great Qian Imperial Palace, apart from the current emperor, Qian Yulio's words carried the most weight. Compared to her, the seventh prince was nothing. What made people take delight in talking about the most was that Qian Yulio was extremely beautiful. She was still young, but she already had the charm of a peerless beauty. But no one expected that a proud girl like Qian Yulio would appear here. What's more, she didn't stand up for the seventh prince, but invited the murderer to be a guest. Don't you still need to take part in the assessment? Lin Sun asked, why should an outstanding person like you follow the rules? Qian Yulio's eyes were full of splendor. Lin Sun thought about it and didn't refuse again. Seeing this, those contestants couldn't help but feel jealous, but they had to admit that if Lin Sun participated, no one would be able to stop him. Deep in the palace, there were many buildings. In one of the palaces, Qian Yulio invited Lin Sun to take a seat, and then asked directly, Child Su, have you set foot on the path of peerless cultivation? Her eyes were big and bright, with undisguised curiosity. Lin Sun nodded. Qian Yulio showed an expression of as expected. Once you enter the peak, you will be like a dragon in the sky. As far as I know, among the young generation in the whole great Qian dynasty, including me, only 3 people have set foot on the peak, and you are the 4th. Only 4 people in the young generation? Lin Sun was stunned. This was the true martial world, where the true martial realm was the ultimate realm. Countless strong people immersed in this realm, and they might have already understood all the mysteries of this realm. But how could there be so few people who set foot on the peak? This is already very good. In the past thousands of years in the great Qian dynasty, there were only 1 or 2 strong people who set foot on the peak every once in a while. Qian Yulio showed a look of emotion. After thinking about it, Lin Sun said, "In the future, there will definitely be more and more peerless people." Qian Yulio was stunned and a little puzzled. Lin Sun didn't explain. He couldn't say that there were countless samsara travelers who came to the true martial world with him, and each of them was a peerless person. When they awakened, they would inevitably embark on the path of cultivation and walk on the path of peerless cultivation. In this way, there would naturally be a large number of peerless people in the true martial world. Qian Yulio couldn't help asking, "Child Su, do you mind having a fight with me?" Lin Sun realized that the purpose of Qian Yulio calling him here was probably to have a fight. He stood up and said, "Sure." Qian Yulio's beautiful eyes suddenly became bright. After a while, Qian Yulio panted delicately and was drenched in sweat as her delicate and graceful figure lay lazily on the ground. Her jet black hair hung loosely on her shoulders, and her peerlessly beautiful oval face was filled with satisfaction. Looking at Lin Sun, who was calm and relaxed, she couldn't help showing a touch of amazement in her eyes. This guy was so strong. He was just at the 6th level of martial realm, but he completely suppressed her, who was at the 9th level of martial realm, and she had no power to fight back from beginning to end. This made Qian Yulio a little suspicious. They were both peerless cultivators, but why was there such a big gap between them? "Your Highness, this is today's spiritual fruit." A maid came in with a plate of spiritual fruit. When she saw Qian Yulio, who was lying lazily on the ground with a rosy face and sweating forehead, and Lin Sun standing on one side, she cried out involuntarily. This picture was so beautiful and charming. Was third princess, many indescribable images suddenly appeared in the maid's mind, and her face also became hot. She thought to herself, didn't they say that the third princess was obsessed with martial arts and didn't get close to men? But why does it look like her face is full of satisfaction after having sex? Get out. Seeing the maid's expression, Qian Yulio realized that she had been misunderstood. She glared at her and scolded her coquettishly. The maid chuckled, left an ambiguous look of "I understand," and then turned away. "Child Su, don't think too much." Qian Yulio was a little embarrassed. She stood up with a blush on her beautiful oval face. That was the unique beauty and shyness of a girl. Lin Sun smiled and said, "If there is nothing else, I will leave first." Chapter 2244. On the same day, Lin Sun left the imperial city. Before he left, he got a gilded token, which meant that Lin Sun was qualified to represent the great Qian dynasty to participate in the martial competition between the 3 dynasties. The time was 3 months later. For the young people of the great Qian dynasty, the imperial city was the place they yearned for the most, which was prosperous and prosperous. For Lin Sun, he had achieved his goal, and there was no need to stay. Riding a maroon horse, Lin Sun decided to return to Longyuan City and continue his cultivation. I wonder where Xin Yue, Xin Zhuyin, and Ling Kezi are now. Along the way, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing when he thought of Jin Tian and Xin Yue. After entering the samsara, everyone changed their identity. It was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack to find them in the world of true martial. Several days passed in a hurry. Lin Sun didn't hurry on his journey. He wandered around the mountains and rivers and drank dew along the way. He was completely relaxed. He went up the mountain to kill tigers and leopards, and went into the forest to collect spiritual herbs. He was quite relaxed. Along the way, he had tested the power of order in this world. It was so mysterious or solid that it firmly suppressed the power of perception of all living beings in the world, so that it was difficult for practitioners to spy on the mysteries of the great way from everything in the world. In a world, the realm of true martial is the end. It is conceivable how strange this place is. In the evening, when Lin Sun was thinking, he saw a town in the distance and immediately rode there. It was late, so he could stay here for the night. However, as soon as he entered the town, a pungent smell of blood came to his face. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and saw corpses lying in a pool of blood everywhere on the street. There were old people, young children, and old and weak women. Without exception, they were all killed by cruel means. It was horrible to look at. The huge town was dead silent, and only the sound of Lin Sun's horse's hooves could be heard. Later, Lin Sun got off the horse and walked slowly. "Hey, someone is coming." A laugh suddenly sounded. A figure appeared at the window of the second floor of a restaurant in front of him. Then, figures appeared at other windows one after another. There were 7 or 8 people, both men and women. They were all teenagers, but their eyebrows were full of indifference and coldness. Lin Sun stopped, his cold eyes deep. Even though the strength of his soul had been suppressed, the consciousness that he'd tempered through many years of battles was still present, and it allowed him to instantly determine that it was very likely that these fellows weren't from this world, just like him. Take a guess. Is there a reincarnator that hasn't awakened dormant within this little fellow's body? A silver-robed youth chuckled. "What's the point of guessing? Won't we know once we kill him?" said one of the women coldly. As she spoke, her figure flickered as she leaped down from the second floor of the restaurant. She was tall and slender, holding a scimitar in her hand. Her eyes were cold. Lin Sun looked calm and patted the horse beside him. The horse neighed and ran away, disappearing from the street. Then Lin Sun asked, "Before I start, may I ask why you want to kill everyone in this city? You're about to die. Why do you have so much nonsense to say?" The tall woman rushed over, the curved blade in her hand emitting a glaring, cold light. The air was torn apart like a piece of cloth, emitting a sharp, whistling sound. Lin Sun stood still and snatched the machete from the opponent's hand. Then he shook his wrist, and the blade rolled back and swept across. Puff! The tall woman's head was thrown into the air, and scarlet blood sprayed out. In just a moment, the tall woman died on the spot. Junior's sister. The silver-robed youth and his companion's expressions suddenly changed. They rushed out and looked at the tall woman's headless body, and their faces became extremely gloomy. "Who the hell are you?" asked the silver-robed youth, gritting his teeth. Lin Sun glanced at him expressionlessly. "Your junior sister is right. You're about to die, so there's no need to talk nonsense." Before his voice died away, Lin Sun suddenly moved. Whoosh! Like an arrow leaving the bow, his thin and vigorous figure tore through the air and rushed to the silver-robed youth and his companions at an extremely fast speed. Kill! The silver-robed youth and his companions reacted extremely quickly. Each of them was much stronger than Qian Yuanba, who was regarded as one of the top 10 talents. But when they really fought with each other, the silver-robed youth and his companions found how terrible their opponents were this time. Every time Lin Sun waved his machete, there would be a handful of scarlet and hot blood splashing out, and then there would be people lying in the field, either beheaded or cut into pieces. Killing people like killing chickens. In the field, there was only a dull puff sound, like a note that harvested the souls of the dead. In just a moment, there was only the silver-robed youth left in the field. Holding the machete that was still bleeding, Lin Sun looked at him indifferently and said, "Now, can we have a good talk?" The silver-robed youth, who had long been frightened, nodded repeatedly. "As long as you let me live, I promise to answer all your questions." Lin Sun asked directly, "Why do you want to kill the people in this town?" The silver-robed young man took a deep breath and said, "Fellow Taoist, you're asking a question that you already know the answer to. This is the world of reincarnation, and all life is formed from the laws of time and reincarnation, and they aren't truly living people. Since it's like this, then killing all of them isn't a big deal." Lin Sun frowned. The silver-robed youth's indifference to life and attitude made him feel disgusted. He asked, "Those are all unarmed mortals. Since you want to kill them, there must be a reason." The silver-robed youth was silent for a moment, and then said, "We want to practice a cultivation method, and we need to collect the blood of all living beings to temper our cultivation." Seeing that Lin Sun's expression was not right, he quickly explained, "But you can rest assured that we only do this in the world of true force. If we were on the ancient road of the starry sky, we would definitely not do this. It's really because this world is too barren, with neither spiritual veins nor magic medicines. It's really too difficult to make progress on the road of cultivation." At the end of his words, there was a hint of complaint in his voice. The world of true force was completely different from the world of heavens in the starry sky. It was simply a remote place. The most terrible thing was that these samsara travelers had awakened their consciousness, but their previous cultivation, memory, and inheritance seemed to be erased. This made them have nothing to rely on when they practiced. They could only spend all their efforts and means to collect the cultivation methods and resources needed for cultivation. The silver-robed youth thought that after saying these words, Lin Sun would definitely understand and forgive him. After all, they were all samsara travelers, and they would certainly have the same situation and experience. But who would have thought that what he had been waiting for was a sharp blade? "Taoism, Pierre, the silver-robed youth was shocked. Before he finished his words, his head was chopped off. "Since there are no living beings in my heart, living is also a disaster." Lin Sun threw away the blood-stained machete in his hand and turned to leave. Soon, the sound of horse hooves faded away and disappeared in this bloody town. After this experience, Lin Sun suddenly realized that when those samsara travelers from all over the starry sky awaken their consciousness, it would inevitably lead to all kinds of things, which would cause the whole world of true force to change dramatically. Whether it was good or bad, no one could tell. The only thing Lin Sun could do was to do his own thing and then do what he could. 10 days later, Lin Sun was travel-worn and returned to Lonyuan City on horseback. As soon as he entered the city gate, he was recognized. "Look, the third young master of Su family is back. It's really him. Tut tut. I heard that the seventh prince of Great Qian dynasty, Qian Yuanba, was crippled by him. Who would have thought that the third young master of Su family, who couldn't practice, would become a peerless master overnight and kill his way into the forbidden area of the imperial palace to avenge his brother?" There was a noise on the street, and many people looked at Lin Sun with surprise, astonishment, and disbelief. Lin Sun suddenly realized that what he had done in the imperial city had spread throughout Lonyuan City. However, he didn't care. The fact that he could practice would be noticed by the Su family sooner or later, and it was destined that it couldn't be concealed. Until he returned to the clan, Lin Sun acted as if nothing had happened. He handed the maroon horse to the servant, who greeted him and went straight to the main hall. A steward accompanied Lin Sun joyfully. When he looked at Lin Sun, his eyes were so hot that they could melt people. And along the way, no matter which clansman, maidservant, or servant he met, they would greet him warmly with a strange look. Obviously, they had already known that the third young master was different from before. If it were Su Qinghan, she would have been flattered in the face of such a scene. But for Lin Sun, it was just a small scene. "Third young master, a man who claimed to be your friend, came to the clan yesterday. Now he is in the main hall and chatting with the patriarch." The steward suddenly said in a low voice. "Lin Sun, stop, friend." The steward was stunned. "Yes, the man claimed that you asked him to come to the clan in advance as a guest." Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes and said, "I see." With that, he quickened his pace. When Lin Sun's figure appeared in the main hall of the clan, the patriarch Su Yinhai, the eldest son Su Qingqiu, and some other big shots of the clan were talking with a young man in a yellow robe. Seeing Lin Sun, Su Yinhai, Su Qingqiu, and others all stood up with surprise, excitement, and trance on their faces. Obviously, they had already known what happened in the imperial city of Great Qian and Lin Sun's feat of crippling Qian Yuanba. However, until this moment, when they saw Lin Sun with their own eyes, they still couldn't believe it. When Lin Sun suddenly left and said that he was going to avenge his second brother, Su Qingfeng. Everyone thought that he was so crazy that he made such a crazy move. For this reason, the Su family sent many people to look for him. However, no one had expected that the news of what had happened in the great Qin dynasty royal city would reach them after more than 10 days before the person could be found. At first, no one believed it and thought it was fake. But later, as the news was confirmed, the Su family finally dared to believe all this. But there were inevitably many doubts in their hearts. However, before Lin Sun returned, they could only hold it in. But now, Lin Sun had returned. Lin Sun didn't know that his return would attract so many thoughts of the Su family. As soon as he entered the main hall, he looked at the strange young man in a yellow robe. At the same time, the young man also looked up at him. P.S. The 9th chapter is here. I stayed up late last night to save 2.5 chapters. Today I sat for a whole day and wrote. To be honest, I was so tired that I almost collapsed. My fingers were tingling, which made me feel uncomfortable. But Goldfish was still very excited because there were many people who tipped and voted and many messages to encourage Goldfish. Thank you so much. Tonight, I will write the 9th chapter because I really can't hold on. Chapter 2245. The yellow-robed teenager had a fair complexion, smiling and graceful. Lin Sun glanced at him and then looked at Su Yunhai, the head of Su family, and said, "Father, can I talk to this friend alone?" His words were calm. Although Su Yunhai and others felt strange, they still nodded and left the hall with the others. In the past, Su Qinghan, who couldn't cultivate, was favored, but her words didn't carry so much weight. When the people in the hall dispersed, Lin Sun said, "Why didn't I know that I have a friend like you?" The yellow-robed teenager still sat there, smiled, picked up the teacup, took a sip, and then said, "Taoism peer, you and I are both samsara travelers. Naturally, we can be friends, right?" "Oh." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. "Tell me, why do you come here?" "It's very simple. I just awakened not long ago. Although I have embarked on the path of cultivation, I don't have a suitable cultivation method." The yellow-robed teenager put down the teacup and looked at Lin Sun. "And I heard that you once broke into the imperial palace of the great Qian dynasty alone and destroyed a prince named Qian Yuanba in public. But everyone in Longyuan City said that you were a waste who couldn't cultivate before." Lin Sun interrupted, "Don't talk nonsense. Tell me your purpose." A trace of anger flashed in the eyes of the yellow-robed teenager, but he finally smiled and said, "It's very simple. I want to borrow your cultivation method." Lin Sun nodded. "I see." The yellow-robed young man took a deep breath while a wisp of pride suffused his face. "To tell you the truth, I was a core disciple of the primordial Tao court before reincarnation, Fei Yunhe. If fellow Taoist helps me, then I'll naturally treat you well once this reincarnation ends." Lin Sun's eyes became strange, and he said, "It turns out that you are the successor of primitive Taoism court." The yellow-robed teenager nodded reservedly. "How about it? Can you help me?" "What if I don't?" Lin Sun asked. The yellow-robed teenager seemed to have expected this, and said with a warm smile, "After entering the world of true martial, I happen to remember some secret recipes for making poisons. Let's put it this way. The Su family has long been poisoned. As long as I want, the Su family will be exterminated." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and said, "Is this what you rely on?" The yellow-robed youth smiled and said, "There's nothing I can do. After entering the true martial world, I've lost all my cultivation. The only things I can rely on are these little toys that aren't worth mentioning." "Do you know who I am?" Lin Sun suddenly asked. The yellow-robed youth was stunned, and then he said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, you don't have to care about the life and death of the entire Su clan, but I have to remind you that you were poisoned long ago after you entered this hall. If you don't believe me, you can circulate your cultivation base and feel your heart and lungs to see if you feel any pain." There was a playful look in his eyes. Obviously, he had long since prepared all methods and strategies, and he seemed to be extremely confident. After a moment of silence, Lin Sun also smiled and walked towards the yellow-robed boy. He did notice that there were traces of gray powder lingering in his heart and lungs, but as he circulated his cultivation, the powder was melted away. This was the power of the absolute true martial realm, and also the most marvelous aspect of the great Tao furnace scripture. The body was like a furnace, impervious to all poisons. The yellow-robed youth frowned and said, "Are you really going to fight to the death?" As he said, an animal skin drum appeared in his palm. "As long as I gently beat this drum, your heart and lungs will explode in an instant." Lin Sun didn't stop and said indifferently, "Then why don't you beat it and let me hear it? I'm giving you face, but you don't want it." The yellow-robed youth's face darkened, and the animal skin drum in his hand made a dull sound like thunder. But to his surprise, Lin Sun didn't respond at all. The yellow-robed youth's pupils shrank, and he suddenly stood up. He had realized that something was wrong. At this time, Lin Sun had rushed to him, grabbed the yellow-robed youth's neck as fast as lightning, and lifted him into the air. His cheeks turned red, and he had difficulty breathing. "Fellow Taoist, let's talk it out." The yellow-robed youth was completely panicked, showing a look of horror. "If you weren't the successor of the primitive Taoist court, maybe I would spare your life. Unfortunately, you just exposed your identity in front of me." Lin Sun's eyes were cold. Who are you?" The yellow-robed youth struggled violently, feeling that something was wrong. Crack! The yellow-robed youth's neck was broken, and his head tilted down softly. "How stupid you are to expose your identity without knowing who the enemy is." Lin Sun shook his head and began to search the yellow-robed youth's body. Unfortunately, he didn't find the antidote. Obviously, even if Lin Sun promised to hand over the cultivation method this time, the yellow-robed youth would never hand over the antidote to save people. However, it didn't matter if there was no antidote. Lin Sun had the inheritance of scripture of herbs in heaven, so it was impossible for him to be trapped by some inferior poison. What really troubled Lin Sun was how to explain to the clansmen of Su family. After half an hour, in the main hall, Su Yinhai and other senior officials were full of surprise and confusion. Lin Sun had already explained his identity as a samsara traveler, without concealing anything. This kind of thing couldn't be concealed at all. This time, the samsara of the world of Zhenwu would last for 10 years. With the awakening of countless samsara travelers who entered the world of Zhenwu, the world was bound to change. At that time, the news couldn't be concealed. Instead of that, it was better to reveal the truth now. However, Lin Sun didn't reveal his name. Once it was revealed, the overmatches from the 6 Tao courts and the 10 war clans would definitely come to him. After a long time, Su Yinhai asked, "If you leave in the future, will my son be in danger?" Obviously, he was most concerned about his son Su Qinghan. Lin Sun said no. More than that, after he left, Su Qinghan's soul would regain control of this body with cultivation. Wasn't this also a good fortune? In the end, Su Yunhai and others accepted all this. Whether they were willing or not, it had happened, and there was no possibility to change it. However, Su Yunhai still gave the order to seal off this shocking news. Otherwise, the world would think that his third son was possessed by a monster. On the same day, Lin Sun wrote a prescription and gave it to Su Yunhai. The poison in the Su family was removed one by one that night. More and more samsara travelers have awakened. Late at night, after returning to his residence, Lin Sun was lost in thought. He knew very well that once those guys from the starry sky were awakened, they would do anything to leave the world of Zhenwu in order to set foot on the road of cultivation again. After all, in their eyes, the world of Zhenwu was just a reincarnation. They wouldn't care about the order of this world or the life and death of the people in this world. Of course, Lin Sun couldn't care about these things alone, but he couldn't ignore the safety of the Su family. After all, his soul had occupied Su Qinghan's body. "Third child, it's late. You'd better go to bed early," Qingzhu came in and said in a clear voice. Lin Sun agreed. At this moment, footsteps came from outside the courtyard. Third brother, are you asleep?" It was Su Qingqiu's voice. Lin Sun immediately got up and welcomed Su Qingqiu into the courtyard. "Qingzhu, you go to have a rest first. I have something to talk to my brother," Lin Sun said casually. "Oh." Qingzhu turned around and left. without outsiders. Su Qingqiu said in a low voice, "Taoism peer, I have a presumptuous request. I hope you can fulfill it." "What's the matter?" Lin Sun asked. Su Qingqiu took a deep breath and said, "I want to be as strong as you. In this way, I can protect my clansmen no matter how many samsara travelers there are in the future, and our Su family is threatened." Lin Sun was stunned, but he understood. As the eldest son of the Su family, Su Qingqiu must be worried that the Su family would be affected if the world was disturbed by samsara travelers. What was more, it was just some cultivation methods. Lin Sun had many inheritances in his mind. If he randomly taught Su Qingqiu one of them, his cultivation would undergo an amazing transformation. Lin Sun immediately returned to his room and found a pen and paper. After thinking for a while, he wrote down a secret method of practicing qi and gave it to Su Qingqiu. "Thank you, Taoism peer. Thank you." Su Qingqiu looked it up and down and realized the magic of this secret method. He was both surprised and excited. Soon, Su Qingqiu left in a hurry. From that day on, Lin Sun's life became peaceful again. Apart from practicing, he almost never went out of the house. 1 month later, Lin Sun broke through the 7th level of martial realm, small circulation. 2 months later, Lin Sun broke through the 8th level of martial realm, large circulation. Every single breakthrough he made was firm and steady, and success came naturally when the conditions were right, and he displayed an extremely perfect transformation. During this period of time, many incredible changes took place in the territory of the Great Qian, the Great Chu, and the Great Wei dynasties in the world of true martial. Rumors about samsara travelers began to appear one after another, and the world became turbulent. All this was expected by Lin Sun. Even if he didn't go out, he knew the news from the Su family. However, the samsara travelers who were awakened were few and far between, and the noise they made was limited. After all, it was only the first year in the world of true martial. Although there were a large number of practitioners who entered samsara, not everyone could be awakened. Not everyone could be awakened in the first year. Lin Sun was the only one who was awakened at the first time. Early this morning, as usual, Qingzhu walked into Lin's room with a basin, towel, toothbrush, and other things for washing. But Lin Sun was no longer in the room. Only a letter and a secret method of cultivation were left on the desk. The words to Qingzhu were clearly written on the letter. Qingzhu dared to open it. After reading it carefully, her watery eyes were filled with tears, and her heart was full of sadness and reluctance. Third child left to participate in the martial competition. Before he left her a secret method of cultivation. This made Qingzhu realize that third child might not come back in a short time. At the thought of this, Qingzhu felt indescribably sad. She seemed to be out of control and lost her soul. She grew up with third child, and they were as close as sister and brother. Now that they suddenly separated, she naturally felt empty and sad. At this time, a consciousness quietly awakened in her soul. Chapter 2246. Jin Tian Xianyue stared at the letter in her hand, and her gaze started to drift. So the third young master, Su Qinghan, that Qingzhu served, was a reincarnator who awakened before me. Yes, at this moment, Qingzhu's body had been replaced by Jintian Xuanyue's awakened consciousness. This fellow is really a good person. Jintian Xianyue picked up the cultivation manual on the table, and a smile appeared in her watery eyes. After entering the world of samsara, the inheritance and cultivation of the past would disappear. If she wanted to step on the path of cultivation again, she would have to find another cultivation technique. Jintian Xianyue realized that she was lucky to have obtained a cultivation technique left behind by another reincarnator the moment she awakened. Furthermore, she could tell that the cultivation technique was extraordinary with a single glance. But very quickly, Jintian Xianyue was stunned. She placed the letter and the cultivation manual before her eyes and felt a sense of familiarity as she looked at the words. However, Jintian Xianyue could not tell if this feeling of familiarity came from Qingzhu or herself. After being in a daze for a long time, Jin Tian Xianyue began to sort through Qingzhu's memories. It didn't take long for her to realize that Qingzhu's memories were all related to her third young master, Su Qinghan. They were childhood sweethearts, living together and living together. Qingzhu was slightly older and had always treated Su Qinghan as a younger brother. As they grew older, Qingzhu and Su Qinghan grew closer. After a long time, Jin Tian Xianyue couldn't help but sigh. This last was really a lively and considerate sister. If it wasn't for her, Su Qinghan would probably be very lonely since she couldn't cultivate. Very quickly, Jin Tian Xianyue captured some different memories. These memories happened half a year ago. At that time, Qingzhu suddenly realized that the third young master seemed to have grown up overnight. Through Qingzhu's memories, Jin Tian Xianyue saw a different Su Qinghan from before. She immediately determined that the reincarnator in Su Qinghan's body had awakened at that time. But when she saw the completely different Su Qinghan, Jin Tian Xianyue couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. That feeling was as if she had seen it somewhere before, and it was very familiar. After a while, Jin Tian Xianyue's heart trembled as a bolt of lightning flashed through her mind. Yes, young master. It must be him. In that instant, Jin Tian Xianyue finally understood where that familiar feeling came from. A person's appearance could be changed, but it was very difficult to change his handwriting, his behavior, and the habits he developed when doing things. In the past, Golden Sky Mystic Moon had accompanied Lin Sun in the Hongmeng world, so he was most familiar with Lin Sun's actions and habits. Now that he thought about it, how could he not understand that what had awakened in Su Qinghan was Lin Sun's consciousness? An indescribable joy welled up in Jin Tian Xianyue's heart. She didn't expect that she would accompany Lin Sun in such a way after entering Zhenwu world. What was more amazing was that she and Lin Sun grew up together like childhood sweethearts. Could it be the will of the heavens? Golden Sky Mystic Moon's emotions fluctuated, and his eyes flickered with splendor. But right after that, an indescribable sense of loss surged into his heart. The young master, he had already left. Looking at the contents of the letter, Jin Tian Xianyue suddenly realized that Lin Sun must have thought that he could leave his will of the great way in this Zhenwu world by participating in the true martial competition. Even if he did this step, it was very likely that he would leave Zhenwu world. The joy in Jin Tian Xianyue's heart vanished, and her heart was empty. They had parted before they met. No, I have to go to the young master. In any case, I have to see him. Taking a deep breath, Jin Tian Xianyue made a decision. The imperial capital of the great Qian dynasty. Cloud Pavilion was the place where Qian Yulio and Lin Sun had agreed to meet. Brother Su, tell me the truth. Are you a samsara traveler? Qian Yulio asked directly at the first time they met. There was a rare seriousness on her beautiful oval face. Lin Sun nodded and looked very calm. It's true. Qian Yulio had a complicated expression and seemed a little lost. So, you still have to leave this world in the future. Lin Sun looked at Qian Yulio strangely and said, It's true. Qian Yulio took a deep breath. Qian Yulio, I've lived for so long, but this is the first time I've seen someone who doesn't belong to this world. Before you leave, can you tell me about the world you came from? Yes. Lin Sun had a good impression of Qian Yulio. Qian Yulio smiled brightly and got up. Let's go. I'll take you to meet the others, and then we'll go to Martial Mountain together. True Martial Mountain was the location of the true martial competition. Located at the junction of the Great Qian, Great Chu, and Great Wei dynasties, this mountain was regarded as the first mountain in Zhenwu world. In the past, the true martial competition was held on this mountain. Soon, Lin Sun and Qian Yulio met the other 8 strong men who would participate in the true martial competition with them. They were all young boys and girls of more than 10 years old. They were handsome, and extremely outstanding. Except for Lin Sun, the 9 people, including Qian Yulio, were all at the 9th level of the true martial realm. Among them, Qian Yulio and the other 2 had embarked on the peerless cultivation path. However, Lin Sun sighed with emotion when he thought that there were so few peerless figures in the younger generation of the whole great Qin dynasty. The true martial world could only be regarded as a secular world. After the introduction of Qian Yulio, Lin Sun exchanged greetings with others, and then Qian Yulio set off for Martial Mountain with a group of people. Along the way, Qian Yulio would chat with Lin Sun as long as he had time, like a curious baby, asking about the things outside the true martial world. Lin Sun didn't want to hurt Qian Yulio, so he only picked out some things about Xiao Empire and talked about the lower 5 realms of cultivation. But even so, Qian Yulio couldn't help marveling and yearning every time she heard it. Her ancestors had lived in the true martial world for generations. So even though Qian Yulio was the #1 genius of the Great Gan Dynasty, when she found out that there was a brand new and magnificent world outside the true martial world, it still greatly impacted her mental state. Qian Yulio knew very well that she was destined to stay in the true martial world for the rest of her life, but she was always unwilling. True martial, spirit gang, spirit sea, cave world, will development. On this day, Qian Yulio suddenly said, "Child Su, do you think it's really impossible to break through from the true martial realm to a higher level in the true martial world?" Lin Sun shook his head. He was just a samsara traveler, so how could he know these things? Qian Yulio took a deep breath and said firmly, "I believe it's possible. When I make a breakthrough one day, who knows? I might be able to leave this true martial world." At the end, a touch of longing appeared on her white, oval face. Lin Sun was moved. If possible, he didn't mind helping Qian Yulio. 7 days later, in the distance, a majestic and towering mountain could be seen on the horizon, rising from the ground and going straight to the sky. That's the true Martial Mountain, which is shrouded in mist all year round. The strangest thing is that no one has been able to climb this mountain or even get close to it for countless years. Qian Yulio pointed to the mountain in the distance and said, "The older generation said that it's a holy mountain covered with the power of God. It's not something that the creatures in this world can get close to." Others also looked over at the mountain in unison. The true Martial Mountain was regarded as the first holy mountain in the world by the 3 dynasties. It was like a forbidden area. For countless years, no one knew how many strong people had come to explore it. But no one could get close to this mountain without exception. Lin Sun looked over and couldn't help showing a strange expression. The true Martial Mountain was covered with a layer of obscure power, like the Order of Heaven. Not to mention the true martial realm. Even the emperors on the starry sky, ancient road, couldn't get close to it. This shocked Lin Sun. It was really incredible that there was a holy mountain covered with the Order of Heaven in a secular world. Lin Sun suddenly said, "I heard that as long as you win the first place in the true martial competition, you can enter this mountain?" "Yes." Qian Yulio nodded. "Every 10 years, there will be a true martial competition. Every time, only the first place has the opportunity to enter the true martial mountain." Did those who have entered the true martial mountain find anything? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. "My father entered the true martial mountain as the first place 30 years ago. According to him, after entering the mountain, one's consciousness will become blurred. When he walks out of the mountain, he will forget everything." Qian Yulio's starry eyes flashed with reminiscence. "Although I don't remember anything, my imperial father can still sense that after he returned from that mountain, there was a mysterious karmic luck on him that allowed him to do everything smoothly. In the past years, those strong people who had the opportunity to enter the true martial mountain, like my father, were all in the same situation. No one could remember clearly what it was like in a mountain and what they had experienced after entering the mountain." Lin Sun was stunned. Was it really as simple as increasing luck after entering the true martial mountain? I'm afraid it wouldn't be so simple. As they talked, they had quickened their pace and soon came to the foot of the true martial mountain. There stood an extremely ancient Taoist field, which was made of bluestone of unknown origin. It was full of mottled vicissitudes of time, covering an area of hundreds of meters. Looking down from the sky, this Taoist field was just like a round lotus. Inexplicably, the sentence, "eternal tribulation of oblivion," a lotus blooms alone came to Lin Sun's mind, so that when he looked at the lotus-shaped Taoist field, his eyes became subtle.